On an October day in 1872, a 47-year-old woman in Connecticut died. People die every day, of course, so this was nothing unusual, at least at first. But something happened after this woman's death that inspired a local legend. Let's talk about Mary Hart, better known as Midnight Mary. There isn't much information readily available on Mary's early life. We know she was born on December 16th, 1824, and that she later married a man named James P. Hart. At noon on October 14th, 1872, 47-year-old Mary fainted, possibly after having a stroke. 12 hours later, she died at midnight on October 15th. Her headstone was engraved with a poetic retelling of her last days. The people shall be troubled at midnight and pass away at high noon, just from and about to renew her daily work in her full strength of body and mind. Mary E. Hart, having fallen prostrate, remained unconscious until she died at midnight, October 15th, 1872. Sometime after Mary's death, a couple of stories sprung up about her. The most well-known account goes as follows. After Mary was thought to have died at midnight on October 15th, her family had her buried quickly. But the following night, her aunt had a dream that Mary was still alive in her coffin. She went to the cemetery owners and had them exhume Mary's grave. When her coffin was opened, the inside was shredded, and Mary had blood under her nails. It seemed she really had been the victim of a premature burial, but had died while underneath the ground. The main thing that seems to have fueled most of the stories about Mary is the first line on her tombstone. The people shall be troubled at midnight and pass away. People have interpreted it to mean Mary was angry about being buried alive and wanted to lash out. As the story goes, her vengeful spirit has endured in the afterlife. She is said to roam the area around her former home on Winthrop Avenue, not too far from Evergreen Cemetery in New Haven, where she was buried. A woman who closely resembles her will reportedly hitch a ride with passing motorists from time to time. In true vanishing hitchhiker fashion, the motorist would return to Mary's house the next day for some reason, only to discover that their passenger had been a ghost all along. Another version of the story says Mary was a witch and her grave was cursed. If anyone visited it at midnight, she would rise up and kill them. Other versions say anyone who struck her grave would die at midnight. Over the years, multiple people have posted their alleged experiences with Mary online. In one account, a girl claimed her boyfriend's dad went to the grave with some of his friends one night. One of his friends peed on the grave and was taken to the hospital after receiving claw marks on his nether regions. Another person claimed their cousin got claw marks on his back after spitting on the grave. Yet another account comes from an individual who said they got severe stomach cramps after photographing the grave at noon. Another story that's been reported in various newspapers concerns a woman who lives near Evergreen Cemetery. As the story goes, one night she visited the cemetery with her cousin, but at some point they got separated. The woman thought she heard her cousin calling out for her and walked in the direction she thought the sound was coming from. When she reached the cemetery gate, she saw her cousin approaching from the opposite side she'd heard the noise from, and her cousin apparently hadn't been calling out for her at all. And even the cemetery's general manager has had a strange experience there. Late one night, he got a call about an alarm going off at the cemetery. He asked the security company for more information, but they seemed reluctant to give him any. So he drove to the cemetery office where, right at 11:59 p.m., he heard a strange noise. He dashed from the building as fast as he could and had trouble getting his car to start at first, but he managed to get it going. He exited the cemetery gates right at midnight. When he got back to work the next day, there was no record of the alarm going off at all the night before. So what's going on here? Is there really a vengeful ghost out there who's angry about her agonizing death and wanted to lash out at the common people? As is often the case with these tales, the truth is a bit less sensational. Most of these legends seem to have originated from the strange inscription on Mary's grave. Much of it simply details the circumstances of her death. It never mentions being buried alive, so we don't really know if that's true. But what about the first line? The people shall be troubled at midnight and pass away. Does this really mean Mary will kill you at midnight if you disturb her grave? Well, no. This is actually taken from a passage from the Bible, specifically the book of Job, chapter 34, verse 20. The entire verse reads as follows: "In a moment shall they die, and the people shall be troubled at midnight and pass away, and the mighty shall be taken away without hand." If you're not familiar with the biblical story, Job is a man who seems to lead a pretty good life until he loses his livestock, all of his possessions, and his many children. The book is all about how even good, God-fearing people will sometimes endure suffering, and the passage on Mary's tomb deals with accepting the inevitable, such as death. So are all the strange encounters at Mary's grave real or fictional? Did people really have paranormal experiences there after interacting with her tombstone? As with all supernatural stories, I will let you decide for yourself what you believe. But the stories of Mary being buried alive or being a witch are just that, stories. When you think of California, there's a good chance you think of celebrities, glitz and glamour, or maybe even the vineyards and snowy mountains of the northern part of the state. But California is also home to a pretty big number of ghosts. Let's talk about just 8 of the many haunted places in California. Number 1, Savannah Memorial Park. We're starting out with a haunted cemetery, which seems like the perfect ghost hangout. But strangely, the ghost stories of Savannah Memorial Park are a bit slim. Savannah Memorial Park Pioneer Cemetery sits in Rosemead, about 10 miles east of Los Angeles. As the name suggests, the cemetery was established by and holds the tombs of pioneer settlers in the area from the early 1850s. Did some of these settlers never leave their final resting place? In addition to pioneers, the cemetery also holds the tombs of multiple orphan children. Witnesses have reported hearing children playing at night. Are these living children whose parents probably need to establish a curfew, or are those orphan children among the restless dead? In another account, a woman claims she was visiting the cemetery during the day and heard banging from the utility shed. At first, she thought it was just a gardener, but curiosity compelled her to look further. When she rounded the corner, she saw a figure that looked like a week-old corpse. The woman screamed and ran off. In addition to other reports of banging from the shed, witnesses saw apparitions during the day and heard disembodied voices at night. There's also a report of a female spirit cackling at a visitor through the fence. Several sources claim that paranormal photos have been taken at the cemetery, but I could never find any. Number 2, Alcatraz. The next location on this list barely needs an introduction. This island in the San Francisco Bay has been home to many things over the centuries, but is best known for its federal prison, which was in operation from 1934 to 1963. Alcatraz Federal Penitentiary, nicknamed The Rock, was established to house the worst of the worst, the criminals who were considered too dangerous to be imprisoned anywhere else. One of the prison's most notorious criminals and ghosts was Al Capone, who was imprisoned there from 1934 to 1939. Like many other ghosts on this list, he didn't die at Alcatraz. Instead, he was sent to a mental hospital and, later on in declining health, was allowed to spend his last days with his wife in Miami, where he died in 1947. While at Alcatraz, Capone was said to practice banjo in the prison's showers to avoid other prisoners who wanted to kill him. I don't know what he did if one of those prisoners needed a shower while he was practicing. Today, the sound of a banjo playing has been reported in the showers, even when there are no banjo players present. But the hauntings began even before the prison closed. One particular cell reported to be haunted is Isolation Cell 14D. A prisoner was put there one night, where he spent the night claiming a creature with glowing red eyes was trying to kill him. He was found dead the next morning. This creature, known as the Thing, has been spotted in various places around the prison, but mostly sticks to cell 14D. Modern visitors to the prison report a raw coldness and sudden intensity in the cell. The prison was closed in 1963 when it became too expensive to run. The island was occupied by a group of Native American activists from 1969 to 1971 and opened to the public in 1973. It now gets about 1 million visitors every year, some of whom report things like strange noises, seeing the ghosts of prisoners, smoke with no fire, crying, moaning, and a noise that sounds like bullets being fired in the area where a group of prisoners was shot at during an escape attempt. Number 3. Preston Castle. This former boys' reform school is located in Ozone, about an hour southeast of Sacramento. Construction began in 1890, and it was opened as the Preston School of Industry in 1894. Exactly who came to the school is dubious. It was supposed to be for wayward boys who had been in trouble with the law, and some of them had been. But Preston was also reportedly a school for abandoned children. Many of my sources implied a lot of parents sent their kids here because they didn't want to deal with them. And life at Preston wasn't great. Upon entry, boys were made to bathe in a pool to rid themselves of things like lice. One source simply said the substance was made of harsh chemicals, while another said it was lye. Boys who tried to run away were often punished with beatings or solitary confinement, and until 1913, all operations were done on the floor. Dozens of people died on the grounds from disease, starvation, or even murder. Preston closed in 1960 and fell into disrepair. The state of California originally intended to demolish it, but a group of local women fought to save it. The state agreed they wouldn't tear it down, but wouldn't do anything to attempt upkeep or restoration either. In 2001, the Preston Castle Foundation leased the castle from the state. They obtained full ownership of it in 2014, and it was open for tours in 2015, though repairs seemingly started as early as 1988. In modern times, many visitors to Preston Castle believe the people who died there may never have left. One of the most well-known ghosts is that of Anna Corbin, the housekeeper who was killed in the basement in the 1950s. Her murderer was never caught. Her ghost has been spotted, and one writer claimed to get a horrible headache when standing in the spot where Anna was killed. Also said to haunt the grounds is Samuel Goines, who was shot and killed during an escape attempt. Other reports include disembodied voices, shadows and humming, orbs, cold spots, physical touches by ghosts, and even the sound of eggs frying. Number 4. Colorado Street Bridge. Pasadena's Colorado Street Bridge opened on December 13, 1913, and spans across the Arroyo Seco, a seasonal river whose name translates to dry stream. Over the years, the bridge has gained a reputation its builders almost certainly never wanted for it. As of 2017, over 150 people have chosen to end their own lives by jumping from the bridge. The bridge first became well known from Charlie Chaplin's 1921 movie The Kid, in which Chaplin's character saves a woman who tries to jump from the bridge. A few years later, the Great Depression hit, and actual suicides on the bridge spiked, an estimated 79 in the 1930s alone. Perhaps the most famous tragedy on the bridge was that of Jeanette Pikanen, a 3-year-old girl who was thrown over by her mother, Myrtle Ward, in 1937. Myrtle then threw herself over the bridge. Myrtle died from her fall, though fortunately, Jeanette was caught in trees surrounding the bridge, which broke her fall and spared her life. In 1989, the bridge was closed for construction after sustaining damage in an earthquake. When it reopened in 1993, it now contained an 8-foot-high spiked barrier that was hoped to deter jumpers. However, people continued to choose the bridge as the place to take their lives. New 10-foot-tall barriers were constructed in 2016 and extended in 2018. But what is it about this particular bridge that causes so many people to choose it as the place to end their lives? There's a rumor that a worker died during the bridge's construction when he fell into wet cement and couldn't be pulled out in time. Some believe that his ghost still wanders the bridge, luring others to their death. He's not the only ghost who reportedly haunts the bridge. Others include a man in wire-rimmed glasses and a woman wearing a long flowing gown who jumps from the bridge only to disappear on the way down. Phantoms have been spotted in the forest below the bridge, as well as unexplained mists and dogs trying to run away. Suicide is obviously a sad and heavy subject. Whether you believe in ghosts or not, it's easy to see why someone might want the souls of their loved ones taken from them by sudden tragedy to still be around. Is this the case with the Colorado Street Bridge? Number 5. The Hollywood Roosevelt Hotel. Opened in 1927 along Los Angeles' famous Hollywood Walk of Fame, the Hollywood Roosevelt is a symbol of the glitz and glamour of the town and its celebrities. But, much like the entertainment industry itself, the hotel has a darker side. The hotel's two most famous ghosts were also famous in life. The first is Marilyn Monroe, who loved staying at the hotel and even lived there for a couple of years. She didn't actually die at the hotel, instead dying at her home in 1962, but that doesn't seem to stop her from hanging out here in the afterlife. There is a Marilyn suite you can stay in, if you don't mind the ghostly company of Monroe herself. She's been spotted in a mirror inside the suite, though the mirror has apparently been moved several times since. A psychic once also claimed to sense Monroe's presence in a hotel bar, and she has reportedly been spotted in the nearby Knickerbocker Hotel. Another celebrity ghost that's been seen at the Hollywood Roosevelt is actor Montgomery Clift. Like Monroe, Clift didn't actually die at the hotel, but at his home in New York in 1966. From what I've read up on him, his last few years weren't that great, so maybe he comes to Hollywood in the afterlife to remind himself of better times. Guests have spotted Clift in the hallways, running lines or playing trumpet. Other celebrities like Errol Flynn and Humphrey Bogart have also been spotted after their deaths. But celebrities aren't the only ones who haunt the Hollywood Roosevelt. Another well-known ghost is that of Caroline, a 5-year-old girl who's said to wander around looking for her mother. There's also a report of a little girl in a blue dress, believed to possibly be Shirley Temple, though she obviously was not a little girl when she died. A man dressed in 1930s attire has been spotted in the Blossom Room, which was the site of the first Academy Awards ceremony in 1929. More ghost activity has been reported in room 213. Guests who stay there report TVs and sinks being turned off on their own, as well as a headless apparition that causes many guests to check out in the middle of the night. Other ghosts wander the hallways, believed to be people who couldn't afford to stay at the hotel in life. Ghosts have also been blamed for guests being locked out of their rooms or stomping noises, though, to be fair, both these things could easily be blamed on the living. I read one story from a couple who brought drink cans up to their room after checking in. When they looked back at them in the refrigerator a while later, the cans were open, even though they hadn't been touched since they were put there. As much as I wish the Hollywood Roosevelt's ghosts would be polite and ask for a drink first, most of these spirits seem to be pretty harmless. Number 6. Chambers Mansion. San Francisco's Chambers Mansion has a pretty interesting story behind it, maybe even more intriguing than the hauntings themselves. As the story goes, the mansion was built by a senator named Richard Chambers who, along with his wife, moved in 1887. By 1901, they were both dead, and with no children to pass the house along to, ownership went to 2 of Richard's nieces. But the nieces did not get along. One of them, Claudia Chambers, reportedly even built a house next to the original mansion in order to get away from her cousin. Or sister, I'm not really sure, the story never specifies their relationship. The alleged circumstances of her death aren't clear either, but most versions have her dying in some sort of terrible accident or being murdered. Alleged hauntings today include a strange light from an upstairs window, strange cold spots, shadow figures, and even the ghost of Claudia herself. Guests staying at the mansion during its later years as a bed and breakfast reported sheets being pulled from their bodies during the night. In another story, a tour guide stopped outside the mansion and took a key out of his pocket, one that supposedly opened one of the mansion's rooms. Several tourists held the key, which reportedly turned 180 degrees in their hand, as if trying to open a lock. In the comments section of a blog entry on the mansion, a woman claimed she and her husband lived there in the late 1990s. One day, both of their cats sat next to one another, intently staring at the ceiling, with nothing but their tails moving for 3 or 4 minutes, almost as if they were focusing on something unseen. Richard Chambers' nieces were rumored to practice witchcraft. Did they put a curse on the house? Well, as it turns out, no, because they probably didn't exist. According to a 2018 article in SF Gate, the story of Richard Chambers has been largely fabricated. The real original owner's name was actually Robert Chambers, not Richard. Robert was a sheriff, not a senator, and made his fortune in mining. Parts of the story were at least based in truth. Robert and his wife Eudora didn't have any children, and 2 of their nieces lived with them in the house, but neither of them were named Claudia. Eudora died around 1896, followed by her husband in 1901. After the couple was dead, their nieces filed a lawsuit together against their family, saying they should at least get a cut of the estate since they'd been raised there, but they never got that cut. The house was turned into a bed and breakfast in the 1970s, boasting celebrity guests like Robin Williams and John F. Kennedy Jr. In 2000, it was sold and turned into 2 separate townhouses, which it presumably still is today. So Claudia Chambers, at least the one in this story, probably didn't exist. But if she isn't haunting the mansion, who is? Are the real nieces of Robert Chambers still hanging around, bitter that they never got the inheritance they feel they deserved? Are Robert and Eudora themselves still hanging around their old home? Or did someone just make the whole thing up? I'll let you decide what you believe. Number 7. Proctor Valley Road. Driving at night can be unsettling, even without the prospect of ghosts. You never know when a dog or a deer or even a drunk driver might cause you to crash. But haunted roads are terrifying in their own ways. Proctor Valley Road runs through Jamul in Southern California, about 20 miles east of San Diego. Unlike a lot of places on this list, it's not really clear just how the paranormal rumors got started, but they run the gamut from typical urban legends to creepy creatures to brutal murders. There is at least one ghostly woman on this road, maybe more. One story tells of a woman in blue who cries for help, and a woman in white who tries to hitch a ride. When people pull over to let her get in, she disappears. Stories about this so-called Proctor Valley hitchhiker say she was either in a car accident on the road on prom night or was murdered there. There are also reports of a banshee on the road, as well as a ball of fire the size of a basketball and a pair of carless headlights that try to run you off the road. Handprints on cars and even KKK and cult activity have also been reported. Another legend in the area tells of a creature known as the Proctor Valley Monster. According to one blogger, the Proctor Valley area used to be occupied by ranches, but is now a wealthy neighborhood. When the area was mostly occupied by so-called cow country, there were apparently reports of livestock going missing, only to turn up miles away. There were also reports of animal mutilation. People blame these bizarre occurrences on a minotaur-looking 7-foot-tall creature with footprints that are 18 inches wide. Stories of this monster go as far back as the 1960s. There's also a story that the road is occupied by El Chupacabra, the famous monster from Latin American mythology. But a slightly more human story involves a now-defunct bakery on the road. I couldn't find much about Haven Bakery. It appears to have closed around 2008. But as the story goes, back when the bakery was thriving in the 1990s, the owner came home from a business trip to find his daughter hanging from the basement ceiling, dead. He then proceeded to kill all his workers, then hang himself in the bakery's public restroom. Ever since, the basement and bathroom where the father and daughter died were haunted by their spirits. There's nothing substantial to confirm any of this. A few people online have said the only death at the bakery was from a girl who accidentally fell down the stairs and later died at a hospital, though this technically wouldn't be in the bakery. I don't know if all of this was completely made up or if the records have just been lost to time. Plenty of people have reported to have seen or been in the bakery. I don't think that many people would lie about something like this. I just couldn't find any confirmation. There's also a creepypasta called Proctor Valley Road. The details of the pasta are pretty similar to the legend I've researched, but with a few additions. Author The Ridicles mentions the bakery owner, but says he actually killed his family, not his employees. Then they mention several strange, unexplained disappearances and murders in the area. I don't know if the author grew up in the area and was just recounting the stories they heard, or if they just found out about the stories and decided to take some creative liberties. But I will leave a link below to the story if you want to read it in its entirety. It's not very long. Number 8. Bodie State Historical Park. Our last haunted place is the ghost town of Bodie, located in the Sierra Nevada mountains of north central-ish California, about 100 miles south of Lake Tahoe. The town was established in 1861 and named for W.S. Bodie, who first discovered gold in the area in 1859. Unfortunately for Bodie, not only would his name get misspelled in the town's name, but he died before it was even established. For a while, Bodie thrived. By 1880, it was estimated to have a population of about 10,000, with plenty of people coming to comb the mines for gold. It seemed like a pretty stereotypical Old West town, with saloons, mills, outlaws, and plenty of gunfights. At one point, there was talk of turning it into the state capital, but that never happened. But as the mines were cleaned of gold, Bodie's people disappeared from the town. By 1886, the population had dropped to only about 1,500. A fire in 1932 destroyed 90% of the town. In 1962, the town was bought by the state and turned into a national park. Today, the only inhabitants are a handful of park staff. Bodie is still open to the public for those who want to see a town frozen in time. The park gets about 1,000 visitors a day, but not all of them respect the dead. One of the most interesting paranormal stories about Bodie, in my opinion, is that of the Bodie curse. A look through Bodie's official website makes it clear that you shouldn't take anything from the area. Staff do their best to keep it as preserved as possible, and even a small rock out of place messes that up. Still, they receive so-called curse letters at least once a week, written by people who took something from the park and apologized profusely for it after a string of bad luck. These alleged curse victims have reported everything from flat tires to the death of pets to the breakdowns of marriages and all their loved ones dying of cancer around the same time. This curse was apparently invented by a park ranger at some point in an attempt to stop people from taking things, but people continue to mail in letters. Because all these objects are considered stolen property, a police report is filed for every single one. So whether you want to save your mom from dying of cancer or yourself from legal trouble, maybe just don't take anything. But thieves aren't the only people who report paranormal activity at Bodie. Multiple ghosts have also been spotted, including a maid who loves kids but hates adults, an old woman who sits in a rocking chair and knits, a ghost girl who died after being hit in the head with a mining pick, and a ghost who loves cooking Italian food. Hey, maybe I should venture down to Bodie sometime when I'm hungry. Other reports include a rocking chair moving on its own, doors opening and closing on their own, and the sounds of a full party, something that surely would be seen by other people if it were going on out in the open. There's another story where a staff member threw a rock down a 1,200-foot mine shaft and heard a voice yell back at them. Mines in general are pretty dangerous, and there are plenty of stories of miners and mules dying in accidents in Bodie. Did one of them somehow end up at the bottom of the mine shaft, only to get hit on the head with a rock in the afterlife? So that's all I have for you today on 8 of California's haunted locations. Obviously, there are a lot more. I tried to include a mix of famous places and some lesser known ones. There are also a couple of places I was going to feature here, but decided to scrap them and do full videos on them later, hence the strange featuring of 8 locations as opposed to the usual 10. There are also places I didn't cover here because I've covered them in other videos, which I tried to link up in the cards. If you've been to any of these places, feel free to share your experiences down in the comments. Also, let me know if you'd like a deeper dive into one or more of these places or any other haunted place. Denver, Colorado is known for mountains, snow, and winter activities like skiing and snowboarding. But there are also quite a few ghosts and legends in this capital city. Let's talk about 10 creepy haunted places in Denver. Number 1. The Molkery. Also spelled Molkery, this building was constructed in 1898 as either a health spa or a tuberculosis hospital. Different sources said different things. It was bought by the city of Denver in 1908 and is now the Montclair Civic Building. During its hospital days, the Molkery was reportedly a site of patient abuse, and those patients are still not very happy about what went on there. Visitors report lights flickering on and off and secret tunnels under the building. People dressed as surgeons are said to roam the building, as well as people walking around in abandoned areas. I'll be transparent with you guys, I'm a bit skeptical of these particular stories. People go into abandoned areas all the time, and there are probably a lot of surgeons in Denver. Still, I couldn't resist sharing the story of a creepy old hospital, a timeless cliche of horror. Number 2. The Denver Public Library. The history of the Denver Public Library stretches all the way back to 1889. Today, it contains over 24 branches across the city. But the haunted one seems to be the central branch, located at 10 West 14th Avenue Parkway. The library's basement is said to be haunted by an unknown person, though some versions say it's a former librarian. A security guard there reportedly quit after working a shift in the basement and getting too scared. This paranormal entity is a bit of a schoolyard bully who tries to push people down the stairs. Personally, my theory is that these people accidentally tripped while going down the stairs, but were too embarrassed to admit they tripped over their own feet and made up the ghost story as cover. But who knows? Maybe there really is a phantom librarian down here who has some sinister motive. Number 3. The Colorado State Capitol. Colorado State Capitol sits at 200 East Colfax Avenue and has been in operation since the late 1890s. Unsurprisingly, it's located in Denver's Capitol Hill, an area which, as you'll see soon, already has a pretty high level of paranormal activity. One of the more interesting Capitol ghost stories involves 2 serial killers who were killed themselves in a shootout in 1883. After their deaths, their severed heads were taken to the Capitol and stored in the treasurer's office for a while before being burned. Now, phantom hoofbeats are attributed to the men's ghosts, roaming the building on horseback and looking for their heads. There are also a couple of stories about politicians engaging in infidelity that ended in tragedy. In the first story, the male politician was caught in an affair but chose his wife over his mistress. The mistress then took her own life and now reportedly haunts the Capitol, causing electrical problems with the building's elevators. In another story, a senator's wife shot her husband at his desk after learning of his affair, then turned the gun on herself. Tour guides claim they've seen her apparition on the building's 3rd floor. Number 4. Cheeseman Park. Just down the road from Capitol Hill sits Prospect Hill Cemetery. Wait, that's not right, is it? Prospect Hill was founded in the 1850s on the grounds that would later become Cheeseman and Congress Parks. The grounds became a park in 1890, and the family members of people buried there were asked to move their loved ones' remains. They were initially given just a few months to do this, and less than 800 bodies were removed. The process apparently still wasn't finished by 1893 because an undertaker only known as McGovern was hired to remove the remaining bodies. But McGovern wasn't exactly an ideal employee. He used child-sized coffins for adult bodies to save money, sometimes shoving 2 or 3 bodies into one casket. He also left remains, both wooden and human, scattered throughout the park. He stopped his work with roughly 4,000 bodies still left behind. Needless to say, the ghosts of Prospect Hill, if ghosts do in fact exist, are said to haunt the park, unhappy at the treatment they received after death. Guests have reported phantom shadows and mists, disembodied voices, and moans and unexplainable feelings of sadness or dread. Number 5. Riverside Cemetery. Denver's oldest operating cemetery was founded in 1876 and has a lot of paranormal sightings typical of cemeteries. Phantom whispers and voices have been captured over the years via EVPs, and orbs, mists, and apparitions have also been spotted. Interestingly, the mist is said to come out of the ground in a spiral shape. But why is Riverside haunted? There are millions of bodies buried in cemeteries all over the world, but not all of them have ghost stories attached. What's so special about this cemetery? Back in the late 1890s, when the bodies of Prospect Hill Cemetery were being exhumed, a lot of them were moved to Riverside. Is this what the ghosts of Riverside are so upset about? Are their restless spirits just as miffed about McGovern's work, or lack thereof, as their Prospect Hill counterparts because that's where they came from? Perhaps someone will just have to ask the ghosts themselves. Number 6. The Molly Brown House. You've probably heard of Molly Brown, the wealthy philanthropist and activist who famously survived the sinking of the Titanic. But before she became unsinkable, Margaret Tobin Brown lived in a house in Denver's already quite haunted Capitol Hill. Molly and her husband JJ bought the house at 1340 Pennsylvania Street in 1884. JJ transferred the house title into his wife's name in 1888, and it remained in her possession until her death in 1932. Today, it's a museum that's been restored to look the way it did when the Browns lived there and receives over 40,000 visitors a year. Molly and JJ Brown are still said to roam their former home. Phantom smoke has been attributed to Mr. Brown since his wife didn't let him smoke in the house during life. People have also reported seeing Molly's ghost as well as other apparitions in Victorian-era clothing. The ghosts of Molly's mother and a rather angry-looking butler have also been spotted on the premises. Is the butler upset because he feels robbed of an afterlife and just wants to be able to rest in peace? Or was he underpaid in life and is still bitter about that? Number 7. The Denver Children's Home. The Denver Children's Home was founded in 1876 as Denver Orphans Home. As the story goes, the building caught fire in 1888 and several children there were killed. Visitors now report apparitions of children as well as phantom voices, crying and whispering. There's also a story of a woman in a wedding gown who has been seen on the stairs. But are these stories true? There's usually a dose of skepticism that comes with any ghost story, of course, but this is one of the most vague legends I've ever researched. For starters, nobody can seem to figure out where the Phantom Bride comes from, and there are no stories associated with anyone who could possibly be her. And did the 1888 fire even happen? I found no solid historical evidence of it, no newspaper articles, documentaries, or any other confirmation. I even contacted the Denver Firefighters Museum to see if they could give me some more information. Unfortunately, I got an email back saying they were short-staffed and couldn't look into it. So, what really happened here? Was there really a fire at the Denver Orphans Home that killed innocent children? Have the records of it just been lost to time, at least on the internet? Or is the entire story nothing more than a legend? Number 8. The Denver International Airport. Flying is already pretty stressful. You got delays, security checks, and worrying that you might get stuck sitting by a crying baby or a motion-sick guy who vomits throughout a 12-hour flight. But the customers at the Denver International Airport have to deal with a lot more than that. Sitting at 8500 Pena Boulevard, the 5th busiest airport in the country has more conspiracy theories than hauntings attached to it, but it was way too interesting to leave off this list. Reportedly built on Native American burial grounds, the airport has been rumored to be the site of everything from Illuminati headquarters to secret underground bunkers for alien experiments. The airport is also the home of a 32-foot tall horse statue, officially called Blue Mustang, but better known by its nickname, Lucifer. The sculptor died when a piece of the statue fell on his leg and severed an artery, and he reportedly haunts his statue. I don't know if this statue is really home to a ghost, but can you blame people for wondering? Those eyes alone are pretty creepy. There's also a story of Native American chants being played on a loop at the airport, during which people reported being pushed and having their luggage knocked over. Apparently there was no living person within arm's reach who could have done it. There are plenty of other stories about the airport that might not make it seem like the best place to fly through. Fortunately though, airport staff seem to have embraced the rumors, even holding Haunted Colorado exhibits there. Number 9. The Patterson Inn. The 14,000 square foot Croke-Patterson Mansion was built in 1890 by Thomas B. Croke on Denver's Capitol Hill. Just 2 years later, Croke sold the house to Thomas Patterson. Rumor has it that Croke sold the mansion so quickly because he'd angered nearby spirits by building it and had experienced some terrifying supernatural activity as a result. Whether that's true or not, the stories don't end there. The most well-known Patterson ghost is that of a baby girl reportedly buried in the walls. As the story goes, a medium holding a seance in the house in the 1980s sensed the presence of a dead child and a crying mom in the house's basement. The baby had seemingly died of unknown causes, and her mother, in a cloud of grief, buried the baby underneath the floorboards. Another version says she exhumed her baby's body and reburied it in the basement walls. After this, people went down to the basement to look for the baby's remains. Some versions of the story said they found ashes, others said they found sand or nothing at all. From what I could find, no human remains have ever been found in the house, even during extensive renovations that turned it into the boutique hotel it is today. Still, people will report crying coming from the basement. Most of the inn's other hauntings are credited to the original owners. Mrs. Patterson is said to mess with the fire alarms and to turn the lights on in the Biltmore suite, her old room, whenever couples staying there start getting, romantic. Phantom voices and the sounds of loud parties going on when the inn is otherwise quiet have also been reported. Number 10. The University of Denver. Founded as Colorado Seminary in 1864, the current University of Denver sits at 2199 South University Boulevard, and some of its former students may have never left campus. Dunkley Hall in the Lamont School of Music is said to be haunted by the ghost of a student who took their own life there. A door close to the elevator is always open, and if you enter the room, the door closes behind you after you leave. Butchell House is reportedly the home of the ghost of Henry Butchell, a former Colorado governor and chancellor of the school's chapel. Butchell was a staunch prohibitionist, and students claim to hear loud thumps on the walls and slamming doors when alcohol is served there. The school's Mary Reed building is said to be haunted by a ghost woman named Mrs. DuPont, an alumnus and major donor to the school in life. She likes to sit in the DuPont room, which was named for her, and read in the dark. Hey, doesn't she know that'll hurt your eyes? Well, I guess it doesn't matter that much. She's dead. Mary Reed Hall is said to house the ghost of its namesake. Random cold and warm spots, doors opening on their own, and electrical anomalies have been reported there, as well as the ghost of Mary Reed herself. But some people believe the apparition is actually of Mary's daughter, Marjorie. The story of Marjorie's death is an odd one. A DU alumnus and assistant professor of English, she reportedly died in 1925 of a disease she contracted in Peru. But another version of the story says Marjorie was killed by her husband, who wanted her money. Marjorie Reed Hall was opened on campus in 1929, and people report strange sounds and whispers there that are attributed to her. So those are all the haunted places in Denver I have for you today. Let me know in the comments if you've ever been to any of these places and believe you experienced paranormal activity. So Russia is a country that's been in the news quite a bit lately. At one point, a year or two ago, it seemed like you couldn't even go a day without hearing words like Russiagate or collusion, but that's not what we're here to talk about. The Kremlin has been the seat of Russian government for centuries, but some of its former residents may have never left. Let's check out the hauntings at the Kremlin. So in order to do this as efficiently as possible, I'm going to have to give a brief overview of the history of the Kremlin and Russia in general. If you're not a history person, I'm so sorry. I'm going to try and keep it brief and only go over the details that are important to the hauntings. So first off, what is the Kremlin? Kremlin comes from the Russian word Kreml, which means citadel or fortress. The Kremlin is an area in central Moscow, which is of course Russia's capital city. The term is often used generally to refer to the government buildings in Russia, which are there. But there's a lot more there too, including churches, a bell tower, palaces, museums, and offices. The first building in the area was a fortress built in the 1100s by Yuri Dolgoruki. By the way, Russian is not my strong suit, so I might butcher some of these pronunciations, but I'm going to do my best, so please bear with me. Walls, towers, and 2 churches followed in the 1300s, but it wasn't until the reign of Ivan the Great that the Kremlin really began to grow. By the time Ivan the Great, or Ivan III, was born, grand princes in the area had been warring and feuding for decades. In fact, Ivan himself was born right in the middle of a civil war. He ruled as Grand Prince of Moscow from 1462 until his death in 1505, and he's often credited with laying the foundations for a centralized Russian state. By the time Ivan actually took the throne, all of the warring and feuding had caused the Kremlin to fall into decay. He rebuilt a lot of the buildings that were already there and added even more new ones. A lot of them are now famous, such as the Ivan the Great Bell Tower. Can't imagine where he got that name from. He was also responsible for the construction of the Cathedral of Assumption, built to be the Kremlin's main church, and Tarim Palace, which was the royal residence and now serves as home of the Russian president. But the history of Russia, much like a lot of countries, wasn't all sunshine and roses. Upon the death of Ivan the Great in 1505, his son, Prince Vasily III, took the throne. He died in 1533, leaving the throne to his 3-year-old son, Ivan IV. Yelena Glinskaya, Prince Vasily's wife and Ivan's mother, ruled in his place until her death in 1538. Ivan was 8 years old at the time and didn't officially take over the role as Grand Prince until 1547 at the age of 16. He also became Russia's first Tsar, which is basically their version of emperors, a tradition that would continue for about 400 more years. More on that later. During his reign, or maybe even before, Ivan IV earned the nickname Ivan the Terrible, and from everything I've read, it was pretty well deserved. After his first wife's death in 1560, Ivan went into a deep depression, became paranoid, and became convinced that she had been murdered. He left Russia and threatened to renounce his title as Tsar. He eventually agreed to return, but only if he was given complete control of the region surrounding Moscow, as well as to be allowed to execute traitors and confiscate the property of other criminals. Ivan was also known for fits of rage, one of which caused the death of his own son and heir in 1581. He also caused his pregnant daughter-in-law to miscarry by kicking her in the stomach. He would plunder cities or get other people to do it on his behalf, and would often kill the citizens just because he could. His victims' severed heads would often be thrown at the feet of their families. Anyone who stood in his way was kidnapped or killed. The wives and children of the members of his court were often killed in his palace, which is still in the Kremlin today. He's also said to have blinded the builders of the famous St. Basil's Cathedral because he didn't want them to be able to build anything that beautiful again. However, it's not true if this is a real thing or just a legend. Over the course of his reign, Ivan the Terrible is thought to be responsible for the deaths of 450,000 people. Ivan died in 1584 and was buried within the Kremlin at the Cathedral of St. Michael the Archangel. He was succeeded on the throne by his son Fyodor, but Fyodor proved to not be a very good ruler either. After Fyodor's death in 1598, a political crisis called the Time of Troubles began. This would eventually lead to the start of the Romanov dynasty in 1613. So let's skip ahead about 300 years to the early 1900s. Once again, Russia was in the midst of political turmoil. People weren't too happy with imperial rule in Russia, which had become one of the most impoverished countries in Europe. Food shortages had led to strikes among industrial workers, and a new political party called the Bolsheviks, led by Vladimir Lenin, believed that the country should be controlled by the peasants and workers. This is a gross oversimplification of what they believed, but we're here to talk about ghosts, not politics. And we will get to the ghosts, I promise. Long story short, Tsar Nicholas II and his entire family were killed in 1917, bringing an end to the over 300-year Romanov dynasty. In 1923, the Bolsheviks, who would later become known as the Communist Party, took over the country, which then became known as the Soviet Union, the world's first communist state. In 1918, Lenin had survived an assassination attempt. Doctors operated and were able to recover the bullet he'd been shot with, but after the operation, he became ill, and he was left partially paralyzed and unable to speak. He did make a partial recovery, but his health continued to go up and down until his death in 1924. Lenin was famously embalmed and buried in a mausoleum in Red Square, which is adjacent to the Kremlin. Lenin's body is still on display today, and his tomb is a pretty big tourist attraction. With a decent amount of upkeep, his body has, for the most part, managed to maintain its appearance and look relatively the same as it did when he died, almost 100 years ago. Can you really believe it's been that long? It seriously seems like the year 2000 ended like yesterday. Or maybe I'm just old. After Lenin's death, a power struggle began in the Soviet Union. In 1929, leadership went to an administrator in the Communist Party, Joseph Stalin, another name you've almost certainly heard before. Stalin was notoriously horrible. He wanted control of the farms in the country because he thought that would help him gain control of the economy. Of course, the farmers weren't too thrilled about handing over their livelihoods to him, but any who stood in his way were killed or exiled. This also led to famine across the country, and millions of people died. Stalin's practices also weakened the Soviet army during World War II, which made it easier for the Germans to invade, though they were driven out later on. He also killed people he believed to be political threats. More on that later as well. He's estimated to be responsible for the deaths of 20 million people during his rule, a number that makes Ivan the Terrible's reign look like nothing. Stalin's rule ended when he died in 1953. He was embalmed like Lenin and originally buried in Lenin's mausoleum. His body was later moved and is now buried in the Kremlin walls. The Soviet Union collapsed on New Year's Eve of 1991. Boris Yeltsin took over as president and remained there until he resigned in 1999 and handed over power to Vladimir Putin. Putin left office in 2008 but was re-elected in 2012. And of course, he is still Russia's president today, and at least in my house, the subject of many fart jokes. So now that you know a little bit about Russia's history, at least the history relevant to this video, let's talk about ghosts. There are a lot of people buried at the Kremlin, and a lot of people who died there. Some of these people have reportedly been spotted wandering the grounds, but nobody really knows their names. The three main people who are said to haunt the grounds are Ivan the Terrible, Lenin, and Stalin. Stalin is supposedly the ghost with the most sightings, but I couldn't find any specific ones. He's believed to appear during times of crisis in Russia, and it's said that he wants to reestablish order. The room he's in is said to get cold when he appears, which is pretty common with ghosts in general. People have claimed to see Ivan the Terrible's shadow and hear his footsteps as they walk the halls. I'm not really sure how they know it's him, though. Maybe he has a distinct shadow and walk. His ghost is also said to appear engulfed in flames, though again, I'm not really sure why. There's another legend that said Ivan had so-called black books, where he recorded the names of people he tortured or killed. As the story goes, Ivan enlisted the help of a monk to put these books together, and then buried the monk alive in the walls with the books so that they could be bound together forever. Seems like kind of a dick move to someone who helped you out, but this is Ivan the Terrible we're talking about. We shouldn't be too shocked. But the most famous ghost story surrounding Ivan the Terrible is his supposed appearance to Tsar Nicholas II and his wife the night before Nicholas's coronation. Years later, when Nicholas's reign and his legacy all went to hell, this was seen by a lot of people as a bad omen. So the ghosts we've talked about so far, and most ghosts in general, have to die in order to appear as, ghosts. But I guess Lenin was a special case because he was supposedly appearing as a ghost before he even died. The first supposed paranormal sighting of Lenin was by a security guard at the Kremlin in 1923. Lenin was still alive at this point, but in pretty bad health. Some sources said he actually walked with a cane, but I couldn't confirm this. When the security guard first saw Lenin, he just assumed it was actually him. But at the time, Lenin was actually in Gorky, a park about 8 miles from the Kremlin, depending on what part you go to and how you get there. Later on that night, when the story came out, other witnesses came forward and said they'd seen Lenin at the Kremlin that night as well. What's more, the sickly Lenin, who had trouble walking, was said to have been walking normally and appeared in pretty good health in general. He ended up dying a few months after this sighting. Lenin's ghost has been spotted in various buildings after his death as well. Some people believe that Lenin will continue to haunt the Kremlin as long as his body is in his mausoleum. In a 2017 survey, 58% of Russians said they thought Lenin's body should be moved and reburied elsewhere, though 32% of those thought he should be buried in the Kremlin walls. Maybe one day his body will be moved, but it's been there for almost a century, so I don't think that's going to happen anytime soon. There are smatterings here and there of other ghost stories on the grounds. I've read sources that said the area where the Kremlin is today used to be a pagan healing ground. I guess people think the involvement of pagans contributes to the paranormal activity. Personally, if the Kremlin's ghosts are real, I think the country's history of violence and all of the political turmoil is more than enough to explain why some ghosts have unfinished business. I've also read that the grounds are supposedly haunted by another communist leader named Sergei Kirov. Kirov was assassinated in 1934, and there's speculation his assassination was actually ordered by Stalin, who saw him as a political threat. The source I read said Kirov was assassinated in the Kremlin, but he was actually assassinated in the Communist Party headquarters in Leningrad, which is now St. Petersburg. But he is buried at the Kremlin, so maybe he's still hanging around. The last thing I want to mention is UFOs. A UFO was sighted over the Kremlin sometime in the 1800s. This strange object stopped moving before a flash of light lit up the sky. Another UFO was sighted above the Kremlin in 2009. So before I go, I want to mention this book that I got some of the historical information from, and it's Moscow History, Art, and Architecture by Kathleen Burton Murrell. If that sounds like something you're interested in, I will leave a link below. So that's just about all I have for you today on the hauntings at the Kremlin. So let me know, do you think the Kremlin is really haunted? And have you ever been there? Or have you ever been to Russia? I've never been, but my parents have a few times, and all the pictures they bring back are absolutely gorgeous. I'm so jealous of anyone who got to see them in person. So, judging from the analytics YouTube provides to me about my audience, the majority of you are beyond school age. Some of you might not remember your school days so fondly, in which case this video might take you back in ways you didn't really want. Sorry. But I think it'll be light enough that you can still enjoy it without having flashbacks to things like hangovers or cramming for finals. Let's talk about the hauntings at the University of California, Berkeley. So first, a brief history. The University of California system was started all the way back in 1869. Today, the Berkeley campus is just one of 10 and boasts over 350 degree programs. One of the school's most notable alumni was Rube Goldberg, the Pulitzer Prize-winning cartoonist and inventor known for his cartoons of crazy contraptions. Goldberg received a degree in engineering from UC Berkeley back in 1904. Berkeley has also come to be known for its political protests over the years, many of which have turned violent. So let's talk about some of the spots on campus that have reports of paranormal activity. The first is Sather Tower. Also known as the Campanile, this 370-foot bell tower opened in 1914 and contains 61 bells that chime regularly. Sather Tower is reportedly haunted by the ghost of John Patterson, a student who took his own life by jumping off the tower in 1961. Even after his death, he's been spotted in and around the tower. There's also a story that someone took a picture of the tower and a ghostly hand showed up in the picture. I can never actually find this picture, but some speculate that it is John Patterson's hand. However, I couldn't find any confirmation that this story was true. I'm not sure if it was made up or if it actually happened and the records have just been lost to time, or at least just not online. The next haunted location is Barrington Hall. This building started out as a student housing co-op back in 1933. Lots of students who organized the political protests the school has become known for lived in this building. It has a reputation for being the home of rebels, students who wanted to push back against the status quo, as well as students who liked doing drugs and getting into fights. Barrington closed in 1990, but according to Weird California and a few other sources, is still in operation as private student housing. It's said to be haunted by the ghost of a student who fell off the roof in the midst of some of the riots, as well as another one who committed suicide in a stairwell. The latter ghost has been spotted in that stairwell as well as in other parts of the building. So now let's talk about Hearst Gym. This building went up in 1927 and was added to the National Register of Historic Places in 1982, but there is a dark side to its history. As early as the 1950s, archaeologists have unearthed Native American remains and artifacts in the area. Many of these early finds were turned over to the Phoebe A. Hearst Museum of Anthropology, also on UC Berkeley's campus. But thousands of sets of Native American remains, up to 12,000 by some estimates, are buried under the pool of Hearst Gym. As of 2018, only about 1,000 of these sets of remains have been returned to Native tribes. Needless to say, many Native Americans aren't too happy about this, believing the remains belong to them and that they should be returned as soon as possible. If you do believe in ghosts, it's easy to see why some of the people buried under the pool might be upset about their situation. Paranormal activity has been blamed on things like flickering lights, strange tapping noises, and general feelings of unease in the gym. I also found a vlog from a girl who goes to UC Berkeley, or at least did in 2018 when the vlog went up. In the vlog, she shows a little bit of footage inside the gym and talks a bit about the paranormal rumors. I will leave a link to that video below along with timestamps. The last major haunted location I want to talk about is the Faculty Club. This club was opened in 1902 to promote mutual acquaintance and fellowship among officers of instruction and government of the university, according to their website. Just like Hearst Gym, it was added to the National Register of Historic Places in 1902. The main ghost said to haunt the faculty club is that of Henry Moore Stevens, a literature professor who lived at the club until his death in 1919. At the time of his death, Stevens was working on a couple of projects that, of course, went unfinished. Did he keep coming back to his old home after death in the hopes of completing his work? Stevens' ghost has reportedly been spotted numerous times. Students claim they've seen him sitting in a chair in his old room reciting poetry. A visiting professor staying in Stevens' old room said he saw his ghost fly across the room and then promptly disappear. A psychic visited in 2009 and went to the room to try and communicate with Stevens' ghost. Instead, they claimed to reach a football player who died of pneumonia in the 1920s. This ghost reportedly left the conversation with the psychic by saying, "Go Bears." So even if he died a tragic death, at least he still has school spirit. There are a few more places on campus with some more vague paranormal legends attached to them. Residence Hall Cloyne Court is supposedly haunted by a couple and their dog after the husband committed a murder-suicide. A few sources have mentioned Evans Hall and numerous suicides there, but there aren't really any specific stories. Memorial Stadium is said to be haunted by the ghost of a former football coach, and there are stories of a ghostly woman wandering campus at night, calling for her boyfriend, Pedro. To be fair though, Pedro isn't that uncommon of a name, so maybe this girl is looking for a living Pedro. There is one last thing I want to mention before I go. In my research, I came across an article titled, "Frat Row is Haunted by the Tiny Ghosts of Thousands of Goldfishes Swallowed by K.A. Pledges, and we hired a team of paranormal investigators to prove it." As the title suggests, the article goes on to detail the hauntings of Fraternity Row by goldfish who died after being swallowed by hopeful frat boys. This article was published on a website called The Free Peach, and a poke around the website reveals it's pretty obviously satire. But as someone who has a bizarre fear of fish, the idea of them coming back to haunt me is frankly more terrifying than any human ghost. I mean, seriously, just look at those eyes and tell me that's not nightmare-inducing. So that's all I have for you today on the hauntings of UC Berkeley. This is a location I was originally going to feature in my video on Haunted California that came out a couple of weeks ago, but I decided to scrap that and give it a full video of its own. If you're a student or former student there, or even if you've just been to the campus and have some ghostly story to tell, I would love to hear it in the comments below. Natchez, Mississippi is known for its beautiful antebellum homes and close proximity to the Mississippi River. But this beautiful town has plenty of ghosts as well. Let's talk about 5 creepy haunted places in Natchez. Number 1, Goat Castle. Glen Burnie, aka Goat Castle, was the site of a brutal unsolved murder all the way back in 1932. When 68-year-old Jane Surgett Merrill was found dead in the woods behind the home. Suspicion soon fell on 2 of her neighbors, Octavia Dockery and Dana. Merrill had been feuding with these 2 for years over her claims of their livestock causing havoc in her yard. But despite the evidence against them, they were never charged. A woman named Emily Burns spent time in prison for the murders, but was later pardoned. Today, the ghost of Jane Merrill is said to wander the woods where her body was found, seeking revenge for her death. Moaning noises have been attributed to Merrill's ghost darting from tree to tree. Piano playing inside the house is said to be the ghost of Dana, her possible killer. There's far more to this story, which is rife with drama and deeper social issues. If you'd like to know more, check the description below for a link to the book Goat Castle, A True Story of Murder, Race, and the Gothic South by Karen L. Cox. Number 2, Longwood. Also known as Nuts Folly, construction on this antebellum mansion started all the way back in 1860. Cotton planter Howard Nutt had commissioned the building to be constructed as a home for him and his family. But 1 year and over $100,000 later, the Civil War caused the project to be abandoned. Despite this, Nutt moved his family, which consisted of his wife and 8 children, onto the mansion's completed first floor in 1862. He died in 1864, but his family and descendants continued living at Longwood for decades. And over the years, quite a bit of paranormal activity has been reported. Alleged activity at the mansion includes spirit voices in the old playroom, orbs, apparitions of a man in old clothes, a woman in a pink hoop skirt, photos of Hallernut's parents being moved on their own, and lights flickering when tour guides make factual errors. Employees would arrive at work only to find toys thrown all over the place, and a former manager once claimed to wake up in the middle of the night to feel someone or something moving her neck. Other stories include a groundskeeper who saw Hallernut's ghost standing in the trees and the phantom smell of roses, a flower which Nut's wife reportedly loved. Number 3. Natchez City Cemetery. Sitting at 2 Cemetery Road, this cemetery was established in 1822 and contains the graves of some pretty prominent people, but one person buried here may still be sticking around in the afterlife. Irene Ford died of yellow fever at the tender age of 10. When she was buried in the cemetery, her mother requested a set of steps be built down to her grave, which would contain a glass window to allow visitors to see her coffin. Like many children, little Irene was scared of the dark and thunderstorms, and her mom reportedly wanted to be by her daughter's side to comfort her, even in death. According to Find a Grave, Irene's mom died in 1892, no longer able to do this. Perhaps it's for this reason that Irene's ghost is said to wander the cemetery during thunderstorms, looking for comfort. The glass window into her grave has since been bricked up, but visitors who descend the steps have been said to come back covered in a strange green substance that later fades. Voices and other strange noises have been picked up on recordings. There is one more interesting story associated with the cemetery, that of the Turning Angel. This statue was erected in the cemetery in 1908 as a memorial to victims of an explosion at the Natchez Drug Company in March of that year. The statue is said to appear as if it's turning toward you as you approach it. However, this easily just could be an optical illusion. Number 4. The Adams County Jail. Haunted prisons are pretty common. Plenty of people have suffered and died there, and it's not much of a stretch to think their spirits might stay behind, and the old Adams County Jail is no exception. While it was in operation, prisoners reported hearing voices, phantom footsteps, clanking chains, and cell doors opening and closing on their own. One deputy refused to set foot in the kitchen again after going in there one night and claiming to see a piece of bread floating in midair. Strange phantom voices have been reported in the part of the building that used to be Death Row, another place you'd fully expect to be haunted. The last prisoner was housed in the building in 1975. It's now used as government offices, but apparently the ghost didn't go anywhere. Employees claim to hear unusual noises and witness equipment turning off and on and a shadowy figure. The building has been investigated by the Natchez area and Mississippi Paranormal Societies, both of whom claim to have experienced activity of their own. Number 5. King's Tavern. Established in 1789, this former inn at the end of the Natchez Trace is one of the city's oldest buildings, so naturally, it has a few creepy stories attached. 2 visitors to the King's Tavern in the late 1700s were notorious outlaws of the Hart brothers. Wiley and Makaja Harp, aka Little and Big Harp respectively, were known for kidnapping women, stealing livestock, and the alleged 20 murders they eventually confessed to. During one stay at the inn, Wiley Harp was said to have killed a baby in a nearby room because the baby was crying too loud. Guests have reported hearing a baby crying upstairs when no babies are there. Wiley himself is said to haunt the tavern, but I couldn't find any specific stories attached to him. He was hanged in 1804, meaning he didn't die there. But did he come back to continue terrorizing guests in the afterlife? But the most well-known story surrounding the tavern concerns its original owner, Richard King. As the stories go, Richard, despite being married with a family, ended up in a passionate affair with a 16-year-old serving girl named Madeline. When his wife found out, she reportedly hired people to kill Madeline and brick her body up in the wall behind the chimney in the tavern's main room. In 1932, 3 skeletons and a dagger were found behind that wall. One of the skeletons belonged to a girl, and the other 2 to men. It's not clear who the men were, if the girl's body is Madeline's, or even if this story happened at all. But all 3 ghosts of the departed are said to haunt the tavern. Guests and employees have spotted apparitions, objects moving on their own, and warm spots above empty beds, as if someone was just sitting on them. The fireplace where the bodies were found is said to heat up, even when it's not in use. Today, the tavern operates as Regina's Kitchen, where Chef Regina Charbonneau offers cooking classes. Let's hope the old King's Tavern ghosts don't get too hungry and eat all the products of this class. Then again, can ghosts even eat? So those are all the haunted Natchez locations I have for you today. Let me know in the comments if you've ever been to any of these places and experienced anything paranormal. It's October, the season of spooks and scares. Whether you're watching this when it goes live or any other time of the year, I hope you're ready for some good ghost stories. Let's talk about 10 creepy haunted places in Alabama. By the way, I won't be covering the ghost town of Cahawba because I already covered it pretty extensively in the past. I'll leave a link to that up in the cards and down in the description if you want to check it out. Now, on to the video. Number 1, Bass Cemetery. Bass Cemetery lies just off a dirt road in Irondale, Alabama, a suburb of Birmingham. It dates back to at least the 1800s and doesn't have any specific ghosts associated with it, but plenty of more vague legends. Rumors of occult rituals at the cemetery have been circulating for a while. Several sources report an open grave there with no body inside. This grave was supposedly exhumed by a cult member who tried to rob it. Dead animals in the cemetery have also been attributed to this alleged cult and their rituals. Reported paranormal activity in the cemetery includes orbs, mists, apparitions, and general feelings of unease. Disembodied screams have also been reported. At least I hope they're disembodied and nobody is actually getting attacked nearby. Number 2, Bottenfield Middle School. Middle school is already scary enough. You're starting puberty and dealing with things like acne and crushes. But students at Bottenfield Middle School in Adamsville have to deal with ghosts as well. Bottenfield is said to be haunted by the ghost of a former male student, though there's no word on who this ghost is, how he died, or why he's there. Strange activity attributed to him has occurred in the school's band hall and choir room, where electrical equipment will sometimes cut in and out on its own. Another ghost, a tall man in a top hat, has also been spotted in or near the school's gym. The man appears, then vanishes just as quickly. Lights in the gym are also said to turn on and off by themselves, and a piano there once started playing on its own. Number 3, Fort Gaines. Dolphin Island is a pretty popular tourist attraction, and with its gorgeous beaches, it's not hard to see why people flock there when the weather gets warm. But the island was also the site of an important historical event. The Battle of Mobile Bay was fought on the island in August of 1864, near the end of the Civil War. It resulted in a Union victory, cutting off one of the Confederates' last ports and likely helping the Union a great deal in winning the war the following year. But the battle also resulted in over 1,800 casualties, and if you know anything about ghosts, you know they often congregate on battlefields where plenty of soldiers lost their lives, often brutally. Unsurprisingly, many of the ghosts of Fort Gaines are those of soldiers. Apparitions in military uniforms are often spotted, with one reportedly following visitors around to check on them, then disappearing after they leave. A female ghost has been spotted at night by multiple people, and other things like shadowy figures, whispers, and phantom footsteps have also been reported. Number 4, Hell's Gate Bridge. This bridge stretches across a portion of the Chocoloco Creek in Oxford. At least it did. A 2017 report said it was scheduled to be demolished, but no word on whether that's actually happened yet. The bridge, known as Hell's Gate Bridge, was opened around 1930. Nobody seems to know what the bridge's official name is, but it got the nickname it's known by due to one of the legends associated with it. People say if you stop on the bridge and look over your shoulder, you'll see the gates of hell behind you. Another story that supposedly took place in the 1950s tells of a couple driving across the bridge when their car crashed and went into the water below, killing them both. If you stop on the bridge and turn off your car lights, you'll sometimes see either the ghost couple in your back seat or, at the very least, a wet spot where they supposedly sat. Is this story of the couple's demise just another unrelated legend attached to the bridge? Or did they perhaps crash their car when one of them looked behind them and saw something shocking? The bridge closed in 2007. That same year, the Oxford Paranormal Society did an investigation there. Members stayed on the bridge for about 2 hours one night in January, but nobody saw anything out of the ordinary. When they went back later, they took a photo that could have been an orb or could have been an ordinary dust speck. Still, despite their claims that the bridge isn't haunted, the stories continue. Number 5. Highway 5. A stretch of Highway 5 that runs through Lynn in northern Alabama is said to carry a lot more than just vehicles. As the story goes, a girl and her boyfriend attended prom together, as many teenagers do. But on the way home, they got into a fight and the distraught girl asked her boyfriend to let her out of the car. She planned on walking home from there, but was hit by an 18-wheeler before she could. The driver drove away, leaving her there to die. Ever since, people have reported seeing the girl walking along the side of the road looking for her killer. She's said to climb onto the side of any 18-wheelers that make their way down the highway, peeking in the window to see if the driver is the one who killed her. Some truckers reportedly avoid this route entirely so they won't have to see her. And if she ever did find the trucker who ended her life, well, I'm guessing the consequences wouldn't be too pretty for them. Fortunately, I don't think any truckers need to worry about this girl. The story has all the hallmarks of a classic urban legend, and I found no reports of a girl who matched her description or any girls at all being killed on the road. So I think we can safely write this one off as fiction. Number 6. Maple Hill Cemetery. The history of one of Huntsville's oldest cemeteries stretches all the way back to the early 1800s, and as with many final resting places, it comes with plenty of ghost stories attached. A few ghosts do haunt the cemetery proper, including a man named Philip Flanagan. Flanagan was married to a woman best known as the Black Widow of Hazel Green. Elizabeth Rout reportedly had numerous husbands and was suspected of killing all of them. Now, her second husband is said to wander the cemetery, not sure of exactly why he's there. Other stories include that of a Confederate soldier who doesn't talk to people but nods at them in acknowledgement as they pass, and Albert Erskine, who's said to haunt his family's mausoleum. But the most haunted place in the cemetery is said to be the dead children's playground, unsurprisingly occupied by the ghosts of children. Apparitions and strange sounds and noises have been reported there, especially at night, when no kids should be out there. The uploader of one YouTube video from 2010 claims to have captured the ghost children's voices, and swings on the playground are said to move on their own, presumably when there's no wind. But why is this playground haunted? One theory suggests the most obvious explanation, that these are the ghosts of children buried in the cemetery. There's also a rumor that the playground was built specifically for the ghost children. Other stories claim multiple children were abducted and murdered years ago, and their bodies were dumped on the playground. Whatever the case, a dead children's playground at a cemetery has got to be one of the creepiest things on this list. Number 7. Consolation Church. Consolation Church and its adjoining cemetery once stood deep in the woods of Red Level, Alabama. These hauntings are some of the most disjointed, random stories I've ever heard attached to a haunted place, and there doesn't seem to be any sort of origin story for any of them. While it was standing, the church was reported to be the home of banshees, hellhounds, a Confederate soldier ghost, and even a haunted outhouse. Shrieks and sobs inside were attributed to the aforementioned banshee, and like with all banshees, they were said to be a sign that someone in the church would soon die. A pickup truck is said to drive on the road by the church at night, following other vehicles. If it catches up to you, the legends say, your vehicle will crash and everyone inside will die. If you're driving by and need a quick pit stop, you should think twice before using the church's outhouse. If you go in, the door is said to lock behind you from the outside. Unless someone else comes along and unlocks it for you, you're pretty much screwed. The church's cemetery is reportedly home to a ghost boy and girl. The girl likes to skip down the road, then disappear. Cars are unable to pass by her. If they try, they're stopped by some unseen force until the girl is ahead of them. The ghost boy likes to play with a ball, as many living children do. But if his ball rolls toward you and you pick it up and roll it back to him, that means you'll die soon. Apparently, the paranormal entities that haunt Consolation Church are even more obsessed with death than most. In 2012, reporters at the Greenville Advocate visited the church and reported seeing no paranormal activity. Unfortunately, the church was destroyed by a fire in 2015. The fire was ruled as arson, but as far as I could tell, the person responsible was never caught. I guess we'll just have to take the word of Greenville Advocate reporters and write these stories off as fiction. Number 8. Hines Road. Gadsden, Alabama is a pretty decent-sized tourist hotspot, but somehow I doubt many people who venture here are told to visit the woods just off Hines Road, where the ghost of a very creepy woman is said to still be hanging around. Local legends tell the story of the Witch in the Woods. This woman was said to live in the area in the late 1800s and early 1900s and loved harassing people. She was especially fond of children, as many witches are. Kids who went in the woods to look for her often didn't return. Stories began to spread that the witch would kill the children, bathe in their blood to keep herself young, and decorate her house with their bones. Another version said she drank the children's blood. Finally, after 20 years of this, the mayor formed a group of vigilantes to find the witch. On the way to her shack in the woods, they found a pond that was stained red with the blood of the missing children and their various body parts. After this, the group found a cave that smelled horrible. One person went inside, let out a horrific scream, and ran back out. He never spoke again. Finally, they found the witch's shack. They opened the door to a beautiful young woman with black hair, naked and covered in blood. It was the witch. The group burned the cabin down with her inside it. People in the city said they heard her screams even from out in the woods. In some versions of the story, the witch has a son and both walk into the woods on fire, never to be seen again. Today, rumors of satanic rituals in the area swirl. Cars on the road stop running, seemingly on their own, and won't start back up again for several minutes. People who venture into the woods will see a shack, but come back later and not be able to find it. Did they just get lost and become unable to retrace their steps? Or is this the witch's magic at work? Legend also says that if you walk along the road at night, a woman will run up to you, screaming about how she sold her soul to the devil, something the witch was also said to have done. Is this the witch's ghost, wanting everyone to know her story? Or is it just a drunk woman who didn't want to get an Uber? So this is quite the story. We've got a mix of Baba Yaga and Elizabeth Bathory, along with some Blair Witch sprinkled in. The vigilante group hunting down the witch even reminds me of a similar quest in Skyrim, though that particular storyline involved vampires rather than witches. All these different elements, most of them taken straight from fiction, makes me think this one's probably just a local legend, albeit a fascinating one. Number 9. Bill Skeeto's Hole. There's not much solid information on Bill Skeeto that's easily accessible, but I've done my best to cobble together what I could find. As always, take it with a grain of salt. Skeeto was a Methodist pastor in Newton, Alabama during the Civil War. As the story goes, he was a soldier in the Confederate Army who temporarily left to care for his wife, who had pneumonia. He hired someone to take his place on the battlefield, as was customary in the day. But when he stayed gone for an unusually long time, people started to think he was a deserter. On December 3rd, 1864, a group of his fellow soldiers found Bill Skeeto by the Choctawhatchee River in Newton. Convinced he was a traitor, they surrounded him and hanged him on a nearby tree. Bill insisted he wasn't a deserter, that he planned on going back to fighting, but they didn't listen. Before he died, he prayed for his killers, but he also said that if they did hang him, they'd never forget that spot. Because Bill was quite tall, one of the men dug a hole 8 inches deep so he could be properly strangled. Bill Skeeto died on that tree. Of course, there is some conflicting information out there, including the suggestions that Skeeto was either drafted into the Confederacy against his will, or that he never even fought in the war at all. But none of that stopped the stories that soon followed. Anytime someone tried to fill in the hole under the tree, they come back a few hours later or the next day, only to find it empty. No matter what people put in or how much they put in, it was always gone when they returned. One commenter on a YouTube video claimed he had a friend who filled in the hole with leaves, then slept at the site in a sleeping bag. When this friend woke up the next morning, the leaves were scattered on the side of the hole. The hole was destroyed in a flood in 1990, but the stories haven't stopped. Bill Skeeto's ghost has been said to haunt the surrounding area, including a bridge over the river. If the stories about him are true, he was unjustly executed, without due process or even a trial. Can you really blame him for being upset? Number 10. Huntingdon College. This Methodist college was initially founded in 1854 in Tuskegee, but the campus was moved to Montgomery in 1909, where it remains today. There are a few hauntings associated with the school, but the most popular two center on the so-called Red Lady, or rather, Red Ladies. The first Red Lady story dates back to the early days in the school, when it was still in Tuskegee. One night, a woman dressed in a red gown roamed the dorm halls and was spotted by multiple students. This appeared to be an isolated incident, but it's been speculated that it was a sign of what would later happen to a student named Martha. As Martha's story goes, she was from New York and didn't want to come to Alabama for college, but her dad said in his will that she had to go to Huntingdon. So Martha begrudgingly packed up her things and moved into the school's Pratt Hall dormitory. But Martha's time at Huntingdon wasn't a good one. She didn't have a lot of friends and wasn't very good at making them, likely due to her desire to not be there. When her roommate moved out, that seemed to be the last straw for Martha, who wasn't seen again for several days. When her dorm president finally entered the room, concerned about Martha, they found her body. She had taken her own life. Martha was said to love the color red. All her room decor, as well as many of her clothes and other things, were red. Legend says there's a red glowing light in her room on the anniversary of her death every year. Her ghost has been spotted on campus by students, presumably dressed all in red. Some believe Martha's ghost stuck around as a cautionary tale about what can happen when you exclude or mistreat people. However, there is no record she ever existed, and no solid date for her supposed suicide is known. So those things do make me skeptical. But if Martha was a real person, may she rest in peace. The school's Houghton Memorial Library is also said to be haunted by a male ghost. This man has supposedly been seen since around the 1980s and mostly just causes mischief. Books fall off shelves and doors open back up on their own after being closed. People claim to see a foot poking out from behind a shelf when there's nobody there. Staff members will leave a room, only to come back in and see items rearranged when there's nobody else in there. This ghost is said to be especially active at night, when students are often completing late-night study sessions alone. It's not clear just who this ghost is, but in the 1990s, a student suggested a name for him: Frank. Whoever Frank is, his antics go beyond mere mischief. He's also said to maintain the library's official Facebook page, though no word on exactly how this works. So those are all the haunted Alabama locations I have for you today. Let me know if you've ever been to any of these places and experienced anything paranormal. I applied to Huntingdon College and was accepted, but ended up going somewhere else. If I had attended, I wonder if I would have had my own encounter with Martha or Frank. Everything's bigger in Texas, probably because Texas is pretty big itself. I've already done an entire video covering just some of the hauntings in the state's capital city of Austin. Now, we're moving on to another major city in the Lone Star State. Let's talk about 5 creepy haunted places in Houston, Texas. Number 1. The National Museum of Funeral History. Sitting at 415 Barron Springs Drive, the National Museum of Funeral History was established in 1992. By a founder who wanted to educate the public and preserve the heritage of death care, according to their official website. The museum boasts 16 permanent exhibits, including the history of cremation, 19th century mourning, and a 9/11 tribute. They've also hosted haunted house attractions in the past, seemingly embracing their unusual and morbid legacy. And in an institution associated with death, it's no surprise that people have reported strange occurrences there. One woman claimed to see a coffin shake violently as she walked by. People say they've heard noises coming from other coffins in the museum, mostly whispering and crying. Most of these events occur in the museum's Coffins and Caskets of the Past exhibit. Admittedly, the reported hauntings here are limited, especially for a building so closely linked to death. But if you ever visit this location, I bet you'll be looking over your shoulder quite a bit. Number 2, Rice Lofts. This apartment building in downtown Houston has quite the history. On November 21st, 1963, President John F. Kennedy made a brief stop at what was then the Rice Hotel. The next morning, he was famously assassinated in Dallas. Cold spots, rattling doors, and orbs were all spotted in JFK's old room, along with reports that the bed would move on its own. People also claimed to wake up with their sheets covered in blood. In 1977, the building was closed by court order after being deemed a fire hazard. It was reopened as Post Rice Lofts in 1998 and sold and renamed the Rice in 2014. After the building became apartments, people claimed to see ghost dancers on the roof. These dancers were often spotted in the ballroom during the building's hotel days, so maybe these ghosts simply migrated up. Number 3, the battleship Texas. Commissioned in 1915, the USS Texas would go on to see service in both World Wars, including the famous D-Day invasion. It was decommissioned in 1946 and is now docked at San Jacinto in La Porte, just east of Houston, where it serves as a museum for combat-related items. During its time at San Jacinto, visitors have reported all sorts of ghostly encounters. A strangely shaped vapor, unusual whispers, and apparitions, including a red-headed sailor ghost, have all been spotted. Like many locations associated with war, the battleship Texas was likely the spot of many violent deaths. Are these the spirits of those who made the ultimate sacrifice for their country, still sticking around in the world of the living? In 2019, it was announced that the ship was set to be moved from Houston due to a low visitor rate. As of October 2021, this hasn't happened yet, and no date or location have been announced. The ship has also been closed for repairs for quite some time, but it was temporarily reopened for the 4th of July weekend in 2021. Number 4, Kingsgate Village. Houses aren't the only residential buildings that have hauntings attached. The Kingsgate Village apartments have at least 2 ghost stories associated with them. The first is of a young woman who killed her cheating boyfriend at the complex. It's not clear just when she died herself, but residents report seeing her walking around the area, still wanting to exact revenge. Though, frankly, she already killed the guy. I'm not sure what more she wants. A hazy white figure and screaming and crying in the middle of the night have both been attributed to her. At least, I hope the screaming and crying is her and not a living woman being attacked. Another ghost said to haunt the grounds is that of a little girl named Ruth. One former resident claimed to encounter and even befriend this girl, who would always be wearing the same clothes, and said she didn't go to school. One day, when this former resident didn't see her friend Ruth anywhere, she knocked on her apartment door, only to encounter Ruth's father, who said his daughter had been dead for years. There's no worldly explanation for this, but the woman never forgot her friend Ruth. Number 5, Magnolia Cemetery. In the suburban city of Katy, Texas, lies Magnolia Cemetery. At first glance, it appears to be a relatively ordinary place, at least for a place that holds the dead. But one particular grave has some pretty interesting paranormal legends attached. Barbara Snyder, who died in 1911 and shares a grave with her son-in-law, was rumored to be a witch. An inscription on her gravestone includes the creepy line, "Prepare for death and follow me," which has seemingly fueled legends. As the story goes, if you read the inscription out loud and look away, then look back, a sphere monument on top of the grave will fall off. Other versions say the sphere floats and glows before falling, or that reading the inscription will also curse you with a lifetime of bad luck. Black cats are also said to congregate around the grave, and one woman claimed the witch's spirit followed her home, appearing in mirrors every time she looked into one. So, was Barbara Snyder a witch who curses anyone who so much as reads the inscription on her grave? Probably not. A 2017 article on Quran.com says inscriptions like this may appear unusually morbid in 2021, but were pretty much par for the course at the time. Still, if you ever find yourself in the area, feel free to leave a coin in the spherical indent on top of Ms. Snyder's grave for good luck. Welcome back. As promised, here are 5 more creepy haunted places in Houston, Texas. If you haven't watched part 1 yet, you can check it out up in the cards or down in the description. Otherwise, let's get into the video. Number 1. Patterson Road Bridge. Stretching over Langham Creek, this bridge is said to be the site of a couple of different hauntings. As the legends go, if you park your car on the bridge at night, you'll hear tapping on the windows. Some of these taps are said to be so hard that they can be felt inside the car. But where do the taps come from? Who would want to annoy innocent drivers in the middle of the night? The historical evidence on this is dubious, but it's said there was a battle in the area during the Civil War, or at least some sort of fighting between soldiers that ended with casualties. Ghost soldiers have been spotted in the area, presumably the ones of those who died in these alleged battles. A blogger over at the Oracle of Dreams claims there were also a few fatal car accidents on the road in the early 2010s. Are these spirits really those of people who died premature car crash deaths and are still hanging around? Wherever they're coming from, be careful when stepping on this bridge after daylight ends. Number 2. The Houston Towers Inn. Sitting at 2309 Wichita Street, this gorgeous bed and breakfast used to be a sprawling 5-bedroom mansion for over 3 decades. The house's then owner, Charles Fondo, spent a substantial amount of time and money renovating it. After he died in 2011, the house was sold, and the new owner planned to continue the renovations in Fondo's memory. But the house went into foreclosure the following year and changed hands again in 2014. Today, the B&B is said to be haunted by Charles Fondo, who apparently loved his house so much in life that he chose to come back even in death. Knocking and other strange noises have been attributed to him, and he's been spotted roaming the property, both inside and out. Fortunately, Fondo seems to be a pretty benign ghost and probably just wants to continue being hospitable even in the afterlife. Number 3. The Jefferson Davis Hospital. If there's one thing we should have learned from fiction, it's that you don't build anything over a cemetery. Unfortunately, those who constructed the Jefferson Davis Hospital in 1924 didn't have poltergeist yet as a reference, so they made this mistake. The building was named for the former president of the Confederacy to appease the families of soldiers who were upset about it being built over their loved ones' graves, but that wouldn't stop the paranormal rumors. The building was closed in 1939 and served a few other purposes before being abandoned in 1985. While it stood unused, urban explorers who entered claimed to hear disembodied howls and screams, and to see apparitions of soldiers and babies. Some even said they smelled sterilization solution. The most haunted floors were said to be the basement and the 3rd floor. In 2014, the building was restored and is now an apartment complex. Still, the hauntings didn't fully go away. Residents often claim to hear strange whispering at night. With disturbed graves and hundreds of hospital patients who probably died there, it's a wonder this building isn't more haunted. Number 4. Tinseltown. When I was a kid, there was nothing cooler than going to a Tinseltown movie theater with its giant screens, colorful decorations, and video arcades. But those who venture to the Tinseltown 17 in the suburban city of the Woodlands might get more than they bargained for. As the stories go, the land where this tinsel town now stands used to be a trailer park, which was the site of a horrific fire in 1971. It's not clear how many people died in this fire, but one of the victims was reportedly either a man or a young boy. Doors and lights functioning on their own, disembodied voices, and an apparition of a boy in a storage closet have all been reported. But is this story true? There's no evidence of a fire occurring in the woodlands during this time period, at least not any that's readily available online. The other big legend associated with the theater involves the apparition of an old man murdering a young boy. So, did the old man kill the young boy? Did the boy actually die in the fire? Did the man kill the boy and die himself in the fire later? Either the truth has been lost to time, or the entire thing is completely made up. But these stories admittedly do spice up an already exciting movie-going experience just a little more. Number 5. Spaghetti Warehouse. The building at 901 Commerce Street has a storied history that's hard to find solid information on. According to various online postings, the building used to be a pharmaceutical warehouse where one young employee met a tragic end after falling down an elevator shaft. The man's wife reportedly died of grief a year later, and interestingly, she is responsible for a lot of the hauntings here. In 1972, the building was turned into a spaghetti warehouse, an Italian restaurant with several locations across the eastern United States. During its run, guests and employees alike reported strange occurrences. Floating objects, apparitions in the men's restroom, and reflections in mirrors of people who weren't there are just a few of the sightings. The grief-stricken wife ghost has been blamed for rearranging silverware, dishes, and even furniture. She's also said to tap guests on the shoulder and pull their hair, so she's not a very nice ghost. But the hauntings here go beyond mere mischief. In one alleged sighting, a girl claimed she saw a woman with a bent neck on the stairs. In the comment section of a 2018 video, a former employee claimed her coworkers would often quit in the middle of the shift due to the paranormal activity. In 2017, the restaurant was closed after suffering tremendous damage due to Hurricane Harvey. It was later reopened as Warehouse 72 on Katy Freeway, though there's no word yet on whether the spaghetti warehouse ghosts have migrated to the new location. So those are all the haunted Houston locations I have for you right now. Be sure to check out part 1 if you haven't already, and let me know if you've ever had a paranormal experience at any of these places. Kansas, the land of rolling hills and prairies. As of 2024, almost 3 million people call this place home. But Kansas has another interesting characteristic, an unusually high amount of hauntings. In my research, I even found numerous sources that called it the most haunted state in the US. Here are 5 creepy haunted places in Kansas. By the way, I won't be covering Stull Cemetery on this list because I've already covered it twice before on this channel. I will leave a link to the latest video I did on it up in the cards and down below if you want to check it out. Now, on to the video. Jackson Park in Atchison is a 100-acre area filled with amenities like walking trails, volleyball courts, and a scenic view of the Missouri River. But Molly's Hollow, located within the park, gives visitors a little taste of the paranormal with their outdoor experience. There are numerous different versions of the legend, and some of them have very little in common. In one, Molly was a slave girl who was lynched for having a relationship with a white boy. In another, she was a high school student found dead in the hollow the morning after prom. Yet another, kind of similar version, says she was killed by her boyfriend after refusing to take their relationship to the next level. Other versions still say she climbed the tree for whatever reason and ended up falling to her death. Whatever actually happened, the tree is no longer there, but the stories persist. People visiting the area at night claim to see the ghost of a young woman or hear her cries for help. An eerie presence, touching by unseen hands, orbs, and an overwhelming feeling of sadness have also been reported. The paranormal activity is said to increase on the anniversary of Molly's death, though for obvious reasons, this exact date is unknown. St. Jacob's Well is a permanent pond in the Big Basin Prairie Preserve in southern Kansas. It's amassed all sorts of legends over the years, including reports that it's bottomless, has never been empty, or is even home to blind fish. Most of these stories are either unproven or fully debunked. In truth, the well is less than 60 feet deep. I've also seen stories of unrecovered bodies being in the well. Bodies of the victims of people who drowned trying to find the bottom of the well. I can't confirm these stories, but I've seen enough cave diving videos for it to at least sound plausible. But the most famous legend associated with the well is that of the ghost cowboy who drowned along with his horse after falling into the well. Reports of this story stretch all the way back to the late 1800s, though there was an alleged eyewitness account of the cowboy in 1924. The witness claimed to have seen the horse and rider around 1 a.m. He thought it was strange that someone was out there so late, but figured he was probably just letting his horse drink. Then, the witness watched as the man and his horse disappeared out of sight, and a moment later, a sound rang through the air. A sound this witness could only describe as the sound made by a dying horse. The witness rode out on his own horse to check things out, but he could never find the horse or rider again. Today, people hear horrible screams they attribute to the ghost cowboy, as well as the spirits of those who drowned in the well. Also known as the Wagner House, this beautiful home was built between 1884 and 1886 for its original owner, B.P. Wagner, and his family. Wagner was a lawyer and politician and a well-respected citizen of the town of Atchison at the time. He was known for regularly holding picnics every year on his birthday and inviting all the children of the town to attend. Today, this might be seen as creepy in a very non-paranormal way, but at the time, these picnics drew national attention, even being attended by President Taft in 1911. At some point in his life, Wagner reportedly made a joke about having acquired his wealth not through practice of law or politics, but through a deal with the devil. Apparently, someone heard this joke and either took it seriously or just decided to run with it for fun. But today, the rumors of a satanic deal still persist. The stone gargoyles that adorn the house's roof are said to be a representation of this deal. Wagner died in 1918, and his widow continued to live in the house until her own death. Over the years, several people have tried to remove the gargoyles from the roof with no luck. One later owner was even said to have died after a fall while attempting to retrieve them, and legend has it that an evil presence still lurks in the home. So, as with a lot of these stories, the paranormal aspects here are debatable. Still, you have to admit, those stone gargoyles do look pretty creepy. I can see how they would at least fuel these stories and rumors. At any rate, this does appear to be a private residence, so please don't visit there or bother anyone in the house or the neighborhood. There are plenty of photos and videos online if you really want to see more. Built in 1827, Fort Leavenworth in the city of Leavenworth is the oldest permanent settlement in the state. There are way too many ghost stories associated with the fort to go into here, but I'll share just a few. Several houses on the grounds that used to belong to officers have some ghostly legends attached. Guests and residents have reported things like faces in the backs of fireplaces and strange noises at night, though it's not clear what kinds of strange noises are heard. The chief of staff's quarters apparently has a ghostly tea party going on in perpetuity. People say they hear the sounds of a tea party coming from the parlor when it's empty. Again, it's not clear exactly what these sounds are. Tea glasses clinking together, tea being poured, people laughing and talking, someone asking another person how many sugars they'd like. Who knows? The general's residence is thought to be haunted by the ghost of George Armstrong Custer, a well-known but controversial military officer during Civil War times. Custer was court-martialed at the fort in 1867 for leaving his post. He was found guilty of misconduct and suspended for a year. He died years later and was buried elsewhere, but clearly the place still means something to him in the afterlife. Other supposed hauntings include a priest who was killed at a fire at the former site of St. Ignatius Chapel, and a black-haired woman in the rookery who runs at people, attempting to claw at them with her nails. Frankly, she doesn't sound like a very polite ghost. But perhaps the most well-known ghost on the grounds is that of Catherine Rich. Catherine and her family lived near the fort in the late 1800s, but their lives were turned upside down one day in 1880 when her 2 children went missing while gathering firewood. Catherine and her husband looked for their kids for months, with the former becoming a familiar face at the fort as she went there often in her search. However, several months later, she died of pneumonia and was buried in the National Cemetery on the fort grounds. But that spring, her husband found that their kids had been found alive and well. Of course, Catherine couldn't have known this as she was already dead by that point. Her spirit is said to still wander the area, wearing a dress and shawl, carrying a lantern, and calling out for the children she never knew were found safe. Arguably the most famous place on this list, the home known as the Sally House was built all the way back in 1871. I talked about this house several years ago on this channel, one of the first videos I ever did, but my coverage of it is in desperate need of an update. The Sally House sits at 508 North 2nd Street in a quiet neighborhood of Atchison. Yes, this is the 3rd place on this list that's in Atchison. In fact, when I was researching for this video, I considered making it all about Atchison, since there are so many haunted places there. I don't know what they're putting in the water up in Atchison, but it certainly makes for some entertaining stories. As the stories go, the house was home to a doctor and his family in the early days. One day, a woman made a house call with her 6-year-old daughter Sally, who had severe abdominal pain. The doctor diagnosed little Sally with appendicitis and immediately began surgery. He gave her anesthesia, but was apparently so eager to begin, he started cutting into her before the drugs fully took effect. Sally screamed in agony, but died of shock on the operating table. In another version of the story, Sally was actually the doctor's daughter, and he wouldn't let her mom take her to the hospital because he was afraid they'd realize she was the product of their extramarital affair. There's a lot more contradictory information about there in the house and various occupants with the name Sally. I read at least one report that said a grown woman named Sally did live in the house at one point, but others said only a little girl named Sally had lived there. Sally is also different ages and different stories, as young as 3 and as old as 7. Whatever the truth, stories of the paranormal have occupied the house seemingly since Sally's death. Another later tenant was said to have a daughter who had an imaginary friend named Sally. When the little girl described her new friend, she gave a description that exactly matched little Sally when she was alive. Stories of hauntings in the house have been around for quite some time, but the most famous one happened in 1993. At the time, the house was occupied by the Pickman family, husband Tony, wife Deborah, and their newborn baby. A few months after moving in, the Pickmans started to notice strange things in their house. Candles would burn on their own and leave behind burnt fingerprints. The family dog would growl seemingly at nothing, especially outside the baby's nursery. The couple would enter the nursery to find all the baby's stuffed animals arranged in a circle, and a neighbor would ask Deborah why she left the nursery light on all night, even though she hadn't. But Tony Pickman seemed to bear the worst of it, with unexplained scratches on his chest and abdomen, the same areas where little Sally would have been cut open during her operation. He also claimed to have seen the ghost of a little girl late one night in the kitchen. The Pickmans moved out the following year, and the paranormal stories have continued, though not quite to the same degree. Today, The Sally House is unoccupied and open to the public. You could tour it or even stay overnight. Visitors over the years have reported all sorts of paranormal activity, including mysterious coldness, trained guide dogs refusing to enter the nursery, fully charged batteries completely draining quickly, and video equipment malfunctioning. Another visitor reported seeing a ghost girl suspended in the air in the closet doorway of the master bedroom. Others still have reported receiving unexplained scratches, similar to those that Tony Pickman suffered in 1993. So those are all the haunted places in Kansas I have for you today. Since there are so many supernatural stories here, and I found it so hard to narrow them down, I might do a part 2 in the future, so keep an eye out for that. Swamp monsters, phantom cars, and a mother searching for her dead child. These are just a few of the things said to occupy the cemetery that some call the most haunted in the world. Let's talk about the paranormal legends of Bachelor's Grove. The Bachelor's Grove settlement was established around the 1820s, about 18 miles southwest of Chicago, Illinois. Most of its early inhabitants were of English, Irish, and Scottish descent. It's not clear just where the name came from, but it was likely from a family of pioneers that settled in the area. There are also multiple different spellings, but by 1851, it was known by the spelling used today. The first burial at Bachelor's Grove Cemetery was in 1844. Families would venture to the cemetery on Sundays to picnic and swim in the pond while they visited the graves of their loved ones. As the years went by, the already small community shrank more and more until it became a virtual ghost town. Rumors circulated of things like body dumping by the mob, satanic rituals, grave robbing, and paranormal activity. The last burial was in 1989. Today, the cemetery sits in the middle of the Rubio Woods Forest Preserve in Midlothian, Illinois. The area around it is rural, wooded, and largely abandoned. There are different theories as to just how the paranormal stories started out. Some believe the satanic activity, vandalism, and rumors of mob members dumping the bodies of their victims there gave the area bad vibes. Others say the early settlers buried in the area are angry in the afterlife about being long since forgotten. Whatever the reason, Bachelor's Grove has earned quite the reputation. It's been called the most haunted cemetery in Chicago, in North America, and even on the planet. So let's get into some of the paranormal stories about the cemetery, and there are quite a few of them, so strap in. One of the earliest legends involves lights in the cemetery. A floating blue light and a zooming red light have been spotted by numerous witnesses. Some believe they're the work of ghosts, while skeptics say they're the result of methane gas given off by decomposing bodies. Another phenomenon reported in the area is phantom cars. Motorists will pass a car on the road, then look in their rearview mirror only to see it vanish from sight. There's never anyone in the driver's seat of these vehicles. Sometimes the car will turn into the forest only to vanish if you try to follow it. Phantom car accidents have also been reported. And cars aren't the only objects that disappear around here. Stories have been told of a phantom house on the trails surrounding the cemetery. It's usually described as a 2-story Victorian farmhouse floating above the ground, with a swing on the porch and a lantern in one of the windows. As you get closer, the house gets smaller and smaller until it disappears. If you somehow manage to get inside the house before it vanishes, you yourself are never seen again. There has been speculation that this house is the Schmidt house, which was nearby and bears at least some resemblance to the house from the stories. In the early days of the Bachelor's Grove settlement, buildings were reportedly physically moved. According to Brad Bettenhausen, President Emeritus of the Tinley Park Historical Society, back in the old days, they moved buildings like we back the car out of the garage today. Is this phantom house some sort of physical manifestation of this. The next legend is that of the farmer and his horse, who both drowned in the lagoon by the cemetery. Their ghosts, along with a plow that materializes in the woods and then drives off, have been reported. There's also a two-headed ghost said to be that of the farmer, though it's not clear why he would have two heads. The so-called murdering caretaker used to live near the cemetery until he went crazy and killed his entire family, then himself. Now, he's reported to show himself to visitors, carrying a lantern and shotgun and trying to run them off. But maybe the most well-known, or at least well-talked about ghost story here is that of the so-called Madonna of Bachelor's Grove. This ghost woman has been spotted numerous times, sometimes in a wedding gown or holding a baby. She is thought to be the spirit of a woman who lost her baby and now returns to the cemetery in the afterlife looking for her dead child. A related legend in the cemetery is the sound of a baby crying just before dawn. An apparition believed to be this ghost woman was captured in a photograph by a member of the Ghost Research Society in 1991. Skeptics believe the photo may be a result of double exposure, a photography technique where two pictures are laid on top of each other and the opacity of one of them is decreased. Those who were present when the photo was taken insist that it's real and that there was nobody in the cemetery who looked like that woman when it was taken. They only discovered her presence later on when the film was developed. So if the Madonna is real, who could she have been in life? One theory is that she's a woman named Luella Fulton Rogers. There are no children listed for Luella on Find a Grave, though it's possible she did have a child who died as a baby and they just haven't been added to the database. Still, she was in her 60s when she died, making her a little bit older than the age the ghost woman appears to be. Another possibility is Amelia Humphrey. Amelia and her husband John had a daughter named Libby, who died at 11 months old and is buried in Bachelor's Grove. Amelia died many years later at the age of 54, after having several more children, most of whom, like their sister, didn't make it to adulthood. Amelia and John are buried in Orland Park Cemetery, about 7 miles away. Did Amelia's spirit return to Bachelor's Grove to look for her child? Other reported hauntings at the cemetery include shadow people, fully charged electronics being completely drained of battery, ghost dogs, phantom monks, a yellow ghost man in 1930s attire, and a so-called hook man story. This last story is typical of the popular urban legend in which a man with a hook for a hand targets so-called lovers' lanes and kills unsuspecting young couples. The Bachelor's Grove hook man has also been said to chase away trespassers with a gun and even try to pull people out of their cars. Visitors to the cemetery will sometimes report getting lost on the paths in the woods, sometimes for hours at a time, even in smaller areas. When they finally make it out, they're stunned as to how they got lost in that particular area. Are these people simply being careless and losing their way on the trail? Or is there some supernatural force at work? So those are just a few of the many paranormal legends of Bachelor's Grove Cemetery. Whether these stories are real, fiction, or maybe a mix of both, it's certainly earned its reputation as one of the most haunted cemeteries in the world. Michigan is a state that, to us outsiders, is probably best known for being shaped like a giant mitten. But most places seem to have ghost stories these days, and they're no exception. Here are 4 creepy haunted places in Michigan. Constructed by British soldiers during the War of 1812, this fort on Mackinac Island was originally named Fort George after King George III. It was later renamed for Major Andrew Hunter Holmes, who was killed in battle in 1814. After the war, it was abandoned and fell into disrepair. Ever since, visitors have reported strange happenings there, The most widely told story seems to be that of 3 men dressed in soldier outfits, apparently having a conversation with one another. But if anyone else tries to interact with them, they promptly disappear. Because the fort was reportedly built over a Native American burial ground, disembodied voices in the area are said to be the ghosts of members of the Ojibwe tribe. The fort has been reconstructed in the past few years and is now open to the public from May to October every year. So, who knows? Maybe you'll experience some paranormal activity there yourself. This hospital in Traverse City was opened in 1885 as Northern Michigan Asylum for the Insane. But unlike many other haunted asylums, this one has no stories of patient abuse. Quite the opposite, in fact. Founding medical superintendent Dr. James Decker Munson believed that beauty is therapy and tried to make the building look nice so patients would feel at home. Patients were said to be treated very well overall, and straitjackets were reportedly banned. Still, any hospital is likely going to have death within its walls, and consequently, the potential for ghost stories. Strange shadows, disembodied voices and screams, flickering lights, and ghost children are just a few of the reported goings-on there. Religious objects are said to be destroyed before they can enter the building, and there's supposedly a ghost in the chapel of someone who took their own life there. Other rumors include a monster in the basement and a portal to hell under a tree on the property. In the years since its closing, most of the hospital's buildings have been renovated and turned into the Village, which offers various shopping, dining, and outdoor experiences. But even now, the ghost stories haven't stopped. A woman in business attire is said to greet guests as they walk into one of the new shopping areas, only to promptly disappear. The Shuswap Point Lighthouse sits in Gulliver, in the state's Upper Peninsula. It was built in 1895 and guided ships safely into harbor, as most lighthouses do. There are several reported hauntings here, but most are related to Joseph Willie Townsend, who lived at the lighthouse and worked as its carer in the early 1900s. Visitors have reported smelling cigar smoke in Townsend's former residence, even when nobody there is smoking. This is said to be the ghost of Townsend, smoking there in death because his wife wouldn't let him in life. Forks at the residence are found turned upside down, something else Townsend was said to do. Strange noises, shadows, rearranged furniture, and even the ghost of Townsend himself have all been reported. But he's not the only ghost said to be hanging around. One story says Townsend's brother came to visit him and died of an illness unexpectedly while he was still there. His body was embalmed and kept at the lighthouse while his loved ones made the journey there to pay their respects. Both he and Townsend's mother-in-law are also said to call the lighthouse their eternal home. Others believe some of the hauntings may be attributed to people who died in shipwrecks in the area. Whoever or whatever is causing these strange occurrences, they seem to be pretty friendly spirits. The lighthouse is open to visitors, so stop by if you're in the area and see for yourself. Opened in 1915, the Holy Family Orphanage in Marquette was supposed to be a safe haven for children who had nowhere else to go. But the rumor mill suggests otherwise. Horrific stories allege abuse by the nuns who ran the place. In one account, a young girl snuck out to play and died of pneumonia she contracted in the cold. As the story goes, the nuns then put her body on display for all the other children to see. Multiple stories suggest the nuns may have killed children and hidden their bodies on the property, or even set them up as Halloween props. Others suggested they set the orphanage up for white children only, then kidnapped Asian and Native American kids. It's not clear whether these stories are true, highly exaggerated, or completely made up, but they no doubt fueled the paranormal legends to come. The orphanage closed in 1965, and the building was used as office space for a while before being abandoned in 1981. It's likely during this period that the rumors began. The cries of children on otherwise quiet nights, apparitions, a baby carriage rolling across the floor on its own, and lights coming on inside the building when it hadn't had electricity for years. Another story tells of a boy who was allegedly killed by a nun, then buried in nearby Park Cemetery. The boy is said to periodically crawl out of his grave, then somehow cause a green glow at the orphanage when he goes back in. What he does while roaming the world of the living isn't clear. Are all these stories just campfire tales caused by a creepy old building and the overactive imaginations of passers-by? Or are they the remnants of tortured souls within the building's walls? After sitting vacant for over 30 years, the building was revamped and is currently in the process of being turned into affordable housing. Only time will tell if the ghosts of the former orphanage decide to stick around. So those are all the haunted Michigan locations I have for you today. Let me know in the comments if you've ever experienced anything unusual at any of these places. Vicksburg, Mississippi is a city with a lot of rich history. It's well known for the Siege of Vicksburg, which took place during the Civil War, and its famous Independence Day surrender is thought to have been crucial in the Union's victory. But with such a violent history comes plenty of ghost stories. Let's talk about 5 creepy haunted places in Vicksburg. By the way, I won't be covering McRaven House or Coon State Memorial Hospital because I've already done full videos on them. I'll leave links to those videos above in the cards and down below in the description if you want to check them out. Now, on to the video. Number 1. Ahern's Belle of the Bends. Not much is known about this Vicksburg hotel. Located at 508 Klein Street, less than a mile from Vicksburg's historic district, the building was originally constructed in 1876 and named for a steamer that brought President Teddy Roosevelt to Vicksburg. It was originally a mansion, and some say its former residents never left. Guests at the hotel have reported the presence of a ghostly woman, a man in an old-fashioned suit, and the smell of perfume, presumably when nobody else was around. While the hotel appears to be otherwise normal, the inside is absolutely gorgeous. It seems to have pretty good ratings online, with one kayak.com user saying the breakfast was beautifully served and delicious. Maybe Ahern's ghostly inhabitants are so taken aback by the beauty of their former home that they can't imagine spending their afterlife anywhere else. Number 2. Vicksburg National Military Park. Like I mentioned earlier, Vicksburg is known for the Civil War siege that famously ended on July 4th, 1863 after 47 days. According to the National Park Service, Vicksburg National Military Park commemorates the campaign, siege, and defense of Vicksburg. Located at 3201 Clay Street, the park has long since been an attraction for history buffs and picnickers alike. But have some of the ghosts of Civil War soldiers chosen this park to spend their afterlife? Several of the park's monuments are said to harbor ghostly activity. People report that the faces on the Pennsylvania monument will sometimes cry tears of blood. Others claim the faces will blink if you shine your flashlight on them at night. Witnesses have also seen smoke coming from the Texas monument and soldiers' ghosts hanging out around the Illinois monument. Other reported activity includes large walls of fog, orbs, the phantom sounds of horses and cannons, and the smells of smoke and gunpowder. Number 3. Cedar Grove Inn. This gorgeous mansion turned bed and breakfast, which sits at 2200 Oak Street, began construction in 1840 and was finally finished in 1852. It was built by a wealthy businessman named John Klein as a gift for his wife, Elizabeth. After their wedding, the couple went on a year-long honeymoon to Europe, where they bought a lot of the furniture for the house. In 1862, John went off to fight in the Civil War, leaving a pregnant Elizabeth behind and turning the house into a temporary hospital. Elizabeth gave birth to the couple's son during the siege and named him Willie after a general who helped her out during the birth. A cannonball is also famously lodged in one of the mansion walls. The Kleins had 10 children in total, but 4 didn't make it to adulthood. 2 died in infancy. A 2-year-old daughter was taken by yellow fever, and Willie, famously born during the siege, was killed in a hunting accident at the age of 16. The Kleins reportedly sold the house in 1919, but the deaths didn't stop there. A woman whose family lived in the house later on came for a visit one day and shot herself in the ballroom. With all this death, it's no surprise some of the departed may have never left. John Klein is often still spotted by witnesses in the gentleman's parlor, and a man dressed in 19th century clothing has been seen by the front desk. A couple who stayed in the wine cellar one night reported a light being turned on and off, seemingly by itself. During the war, the wine cellar had been used as a morgue. Were there still restless spirits down there? Other reported hauntings include phantom soldiers and ghost children playing. Cedar Grove was sold in September 2020. The new owners appear to be turning it into a boutique hotel set to open in summer 2021. Will the Cedar Grove ghost stick around for this new chapter of the mansion's life? Only time will tell. Number 4. Duff Green Mansion. This mansion turned bed and breakfast was built in 1856 by cotton broker Duff Gordon as a gift for his wife, Mary. Are you starting to see a pattern here? And the similarities to other haunted spots in the city don't stop there. Sitting at 1114 First East Street, the building has served not only as a private residence, but a Civil War hospital, a boys' orphanage, and Salvation Army headquarters. In fact, Mary Lake Green gave birth to the couple's first child in a Civil War cave. The cave was dug during the siege so the family could escape, and it can easily be accessed from the house, or at least it could at the time. Unsurprisingly, one of the house ghosts is said to be that of a Confederate soldier, probably one who died in the then hospital. The one-legged soldier reportedly likes to sit in front of the fireplace and is also fond of the Dixie room, which used to be the amputation room when the house was a hospital. Harry Sharp, who owned the house in the 1980s, claims he and his wife have spotted the soldier ghost and heard heavy, disembodied footsteps on the floor and stairs. A tour guide claimed he once spent the night in the Confederate room and woke up to find his bed covers pulled back and moving up his leg. But maybe the most spotted ghost is that of the Green's daughter Annie, who died from yellow fever. Annie likes to do typical child things like play ball and run up and down the stairs. There's at least one story of a toddler visitor to the house playing ball with Annie. And the ghost girl was even reportedly spotted by the Sharps' granddaughter when she was young. Mary Lake Green has also been spotted, but the mother and daughter don't appear to interact much. I found audio of a paranormal investigation that took place in the house's former amputation room and supposedly picked up audio of Annie's ghost. Unfortunately, I couldn't get it to work on my end. Maybe it's because Safari hates me. Or maybe, just maybe, the ghost of little Annie only wants to present herself to certain people. Number 5. Anshuka Historic Mansion and Inn. Named for the Choctaw word for happy home, the house that later became this bed and breakfast was initially built in the late 1820s. The actual Anshuka Mansion was later built by politician J.W. Malden. It was also turned into a temporary Civil War hospital. Again, even more similarities among all these haunted places. But unlike some of these other locations, soldiers don't seem to haunt these grounds. The main and perhaps only ghost spotted here is that of Archie, the daughter of a former owner. As the story goes, Richard Archer bought the house in 1837 and moved his family in. But Archie soon took up with a boy who her father saw as beneath him class-wise. He forced her to break up with her new boyfriend, and she was so angry about this that she never got over it, even eating her meals alone and away from the rest of the family. Now, she presumably chooses her former home as the place to spend eternity, either waiting around for her old boyfriend or maybe still unable to let go of her feud with her dad, even in death. Sightings of Archie go all the way back to the 1960s. She reportedly wears a long brown dress and hovers on the balcony or hangs around the stairs, slaves' quarters, parlor, or dining room, the latter two being places she often ate away from her family and life. Staff members have reported the sounds of glass breaking and water running when nobody else was around. Shortly after the latter incident, a search for the source of a water leak led the mansion's owner to the attic, where they found several portraits from the 1800s. After the portraits were hung near the entrance, the leaking stopped. Was this all a strange coincidence? Or did Archie want these portraits to hang and sent a ghostly signal to get it done? In another story from 2009, a cook at the mansion, as well as a friend of theirs, claimed to see a young woman in a nightgown heading up the stairs to one of the bedrooms. They asked around, but nobody knew about any guests matching her description that were there at the time. That same year, a couple staying at the hotel took photographs that showed the same girl when they looked at them later. However, this one was described as a little girl. Maybe they just meant she was relatively young, or maybe this is yet another ghostly occupant of the mansion. Before we go, I want to mention the book Haunted Vicksburg by Alan Brown. I got a decent amount of my material in this video from it, and it also has tons of information about other haunted places in the city. I will leave a link to it below if you'd like to check it out. So those are all the haunted Vicksburg locations I have for you today. Let me know in the comments if you've ever visited any of these places and had a paranormal experience. I went to the military park back in college, but didn't know it was haunted at the time and didn't see anything out of the ordinary. On the morning of February 8th, 1855, residents of Devon, England, woke up to a strange sight. Footprints that didn't seem to come from any known creature covered the snowy ground, leading some to believe they had been visited by an otherworldly creature. Let's talk about the phenomenon, best known as the Devil's Footprints. In addition to coming from an unrecognizable creature, the prints covered between 40 and 100 miles, depending on the source, and went in places no living creature could go. They seemed to go through walls, across roofs and drain pipes, and even over a nearby river. The prints measured about 4 inches by 2 3/4 inches, and there were roughly 8 inches between each one. General consensus said the prints were made by something that walked on 2 legs, but workers at the British Museum, the Zoological Society, and keepers in Regent's Park were unable to determine just what they were. Because they resembled a cloven hoof, and Satan is often portrayed this way, the theory emerged that these prints were made by the devil himself. He was said to be in the area, looking for sinners. And the prints in Devon weren't the first instance of this kind of phenomenon. A similar set was found regularly in Poland, at least according to a newspaper article of the time. According to a letter to the editor of the Illustrated London News, there was no mark of a beginning or end being distinguished in the Polish prints. They were universally attributed by the inhabitants to supernatural influence. Other prints were found in Somersetshire and Gloucestershire around the same time. And another set had been reported by a ship captain on the very isolated Kerguelen Islands in the southern Indian Ocean in 1840. But these sightings weren't just regulated to the 1800s. Witnesses described similar prints in Devon in 2009. This time, unlike the original footprints, they were able to be photographed. So, what's going on here? What are these mysterious prints? Were they really made by Satan himself? Or is there a more logical explanation? Let's go over some theories. The first theory is that the prints were made by an animal. Badgers, donkeys, kangaroos, and even birds have been thrown out as possible culprits. On the surface, this would make the most sense. Most sources refer to these markings as prints or footprints, something commonly thought of as being made by living things. But there are some problems with this theory, namely the strange nature of the prints. As I mentioned earlier, they went in places no living being could have easily gotten, over rooftops, through fences, and even across a river. An animal trekking through all of these paths, especially for dozens of miles, seems unlikely. The next theory is that the prints were caused by a hot air balloon. As stated by thevintagenews.com, the British novelist Geoffrey Household believed that an experimental balloon was mistakenly released on the Devonport dockyard. According to Geoffrey, the balloon had made the traces in the snow by dragging two shackles attached on the end of its mooring ropes. This is a strange theory, at least to me. I don't know much about hot air balloons, so I can't say how likely this is, but I did find it interesting enough to share. The last two theories are that the prints weren't necessarily real, at least not to the degree as they've been reported. It's possible they were created by one party of a dispute as a hoax to make their opponents look bad. It's also possible they were a result of mass hysteria. Multiple people saw unusual but different prints in the snow, and the stories about them grew over time. Admittedly, these are probably the least exciting theories, though in these cases, the least exciting theories are often the correct ones. In truth, we'll probably never know exactly what the so-called devil's footprints really were. As I mentioned earlier, the famous Devon prints of 1855 were never photographed. A lot of what we know about them comes from information from old archived newspapers or sketches, leaving a lot up to the imagination. Whatever you choose to believe, I hope you found this video interesting and informative. Edinburgh, the capital of Scotland, and a city that over 500,000 people call home. The city celebrated its 900th birthday in 2024, so there is a lot of rich history there. And with history comes hauntings. Here are 5 creepy haunted places in Edinburgh. For my fellow Americans who have no idea what I'm talking about, a close is an alley, usually privately owned and often gated. And Brodie's Close, located in one of the oldest parts of the city, is said to be home to a particularly creepy spirit. Deacon William Brodie was a respected cabinet maker and member of the town council in the late 1700s, but his reputation was a lie. As it turned out, Brodie had been robbing the houses of the wealthy people he made furniture for. He acquired even more money when his father died in 1782, and he got his inheritance, though he squandered a lot of it on drinking and gambling. He also had 5 children to support, along with 2 mistresses. He was caught for the robberies in 1787 and hanged the following year. His story is thought to be the inspiration behind Robert Louis Stevenson's famous novella, The Strange Case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. But it doesn't seem like the alley's namesake ever truly left. Brodie's ghost has reportedly been spotted in the area, carrying a lantern and rattling keys. He's also said to be accompanied by a fire-breathing horse, which he rides straight into hell. Learmonth Gardens is a beautiful area in Edinburgh's Cumleybank district, but about a century ago, it was reportedly the site of some pretty ugly goings-on that give a scary but important lesson on greed and respect. In the 1930s, 15 Learmonth Gardens was home to the Seton family. When Sir Alexander Seton and his wife Zayla took a vacation to Egypt, they probably thought they'd come home with lots of great memories and stories to tell. They probably didn't suspect they'd be followed by a curse. But when Zayla took a bone out of a tomb, apparently some spirits weren't too happy with that. Upon their arrival home, the Setons were met with all sorts of reported paranormal activity, unexplained noises, flying objects including furniture, and a ghost that looks like an Egyptian priest. Both Zayla and the couple's daughter soon became sick with a mysterious illness, and when Sir Alexander gave the bone to a reporter, the reporter soon gave it back after also becoming ill. Another report says the activity stopped when Alexander loaned the bone to a scientist friend, but when he got it back, it started right up again. The strange occurrences finally stopped when he either destroyed the bone or gave it to a priest, depending on the source. However, the Setons divorced in 1939, and Alexander reportedly felt that he was cursed until his death in 1962. I didn't find any contemporary hauntings of the house, and as of April 2025, it does appear to be on the market. I know this goes without saying, but please don't go up to this house and bother any of the neighbors or residents, past, present, or future. Not only is it rude and creepy, but you never know what sort of curses could still be lurking there. West Bow is a street in Edinburgh that was once the home of a man named Major Thomas Weir. Like William Brodie, Weir was a respected member of society, but also led a secret double life. One night in 1670, a woman walking by Weir's house claimed to see a bizarre paranormal entity. The entity resembled a woman but was twice the normal height of one, and cackled and writhed. It followed the woman briefly before disappearing down another street. This was already a strange enough incident, but it got worse just a few days later, when Weir became gravely ill and gave some deathbed confessions that would make William Brodie look like a saint. Weir, a devout Presbyterian, claimed he was actually an occultist and had been practicing necromancy and witchcraft. He also confessed to bestiality, as well as incest with his stepdaughter and his sister. The sister, Jean, who lived with him at the time, backed up his claims. She said her brother had been picked up from their house by a demonic stranger in a fiery coach and was given supernatural intelligence by another demonic figure. She also said his powers came from his walking stick, which had a human head carved on top and apparently had been given to him by Satan himself. The siblings were interrogated about their claims, tried, convicted, and sentenced to death. Jean was hanged, and her brother was burned alive. His last words were said to have been, "Let me alone. I have lived as a beast, and I must die as a beast." After their deaths, their house sat empty for over a century. Then it was bought by a couple who quickly vacated due to mysterious happenings and demonic apparitions. Over the years, the stories have only increased. Witness reports include a ghost calf, music coming from the building, windows lighting up, and shadows, presumably when nobody else was inside. People have also claimed to see a coach pulled by 6 fiery horses outside the house. The house was originally thought to have been destroyed, but was actually just incorporated into another building. It's now used as a Quaker meeting house, where staff members have reported seeing the ghost of Weir himself. The Banshee Labyrinth's website purports it to be the most haunted pub in Scotland, though it's not clear if that title is self-assigned. Sitting at 2935 Nidri Street, the area the pub occupies was home to some pretty grim goings-on throughout history. The building next door to the pub reportedly used to be the home of Lord Nichol Edwards, one of the richest men in the city in the 1500s. Edwards was said to have a basement dungeon in his house, where he tortured suspected witches before their trials. The trials were likely shams. The area around the pub was also home to a network of underground tunnels used by criminals in the 1800s. There's also the story of a 6-year-old girl named Molly who disappeared in 1841 and who's thought to have been buried in a chimney in the building. Many people believe the ghosts of the victims of these terrible happenings are still lingering. Reported hauntings in and around the pub include the ghosts of a prostitute and young boy in the tunnels, a faceless apparition called the Watcher, guests having their drinks slid across the bar or be flung against walls by an unseen force, and having their legs grabbed under the table. A male ghost in the women's restroom is said to slam doors and turn hand dryers on and off. These female restroom visitors have also reported a shadow looming over the bathroom doorway and feeling breath on the back of their necks, presumably when there was nobody behind them. And then there's the Banshee, from which the pub gets its name. A worker completing renovations on the pub was said to have spotted a woman with long red hair, wearing a gray dress, sobbing into her hands. The man tried to talk to her, but she didn't respond. Then she looked up, and the man was horrified to see her face. Pale skin, rotten teeth, and no eyes. The woman then threw her head back and gave a terrifying wail, the famous banshee scream. Her scream scared the worker so badly that he passed out from fear. Not too long after waking up, he got the news that a family member had passed away. So are any of these stories true? Who knows? But one thing's for sure, if I ever find myself in Edinburgh, I'm stopping by this place for a pint. You knew I had to have a haunted cemetery on this list, right? Greyfriars Kirk was founded in 1620, the first church to be established in the city's post-Reformation era, and its attached cemetery has quite the history of its own. 1600 Scotland was home to a lot of religious strife, which eventually led to a bloody civil war. One of the most famous graves in the cemetery is that of Sir George Mackenzie, who is known for his persecution of Covenanters, the name given to Scottish Presbyterians at the time. He was said to be responsible for almost 18,000 deaths, and at one point imprisoned 1,200 Presbyterians in the cemetery. These deeds earned him the nickname Bloody Mackenzie. Due to his deeds in life, his mausoleum isn't maintained to this day, and is often referred to as the Black Mausoleum. In the late 1990s, a homeless man ventured inside the mausoleum looking for shelter. For unknown reasons, he opened a coffin and fell into a pit full of the bodies of plague victims. He managed to escape, but over the next few days, strange things started to happen. A woman visiting the cemetery was blasted backward by some unknown force. Another woman was found unconscious, her neck covered in bruises. Was the ghost of Sir George Mackenzie upset at his tomb being disturbed? It was after this that the mausoleum was padlocked, which it apparently still is today. In the early 2000s, either a group of children or two teenage boys, depending on the source, broke into the mausoleum and stole a skull. When police arrived on the scene, they found the kids playing with the skull on the grass in an impromptu game of football, or soccer, as we Americans call it. Today, people visiting the cemetery still claim to be bitten and scratched, kicked or pushed by an unseen force. They've also reported burn marks and unusual cold spells, even in the middle of the summer. These hauntings are often attributed to the ghost of Sir George Mackenzie, upset at his grave being disturbed. If this is the case, then frankly, I think he needs to get over it. Both these incidents happened over 20 years ago. I guess when you have eternal life, you can hold a grudge without having to worry about how long it lasts. On a lighter note, the cemetery also inspired the legend of Greyfriars Bobby, an adorable little terrier dog who reportedly guarded his master's grave for 14 years until his own death. Sightings of ghost dogs have been reported in the cemetery, along with barking dogs, though that last one could easily just be from real dogs. We all know how much dogs love to bark. So those are all the haunted places I have for you today. Let me know if you've visited any of these places and experienced anything paranormal. Unfortunately, the closest I've been to Scotland is flying over it on a trip to London in 2015. Thanks for watching.